Guys, I've been meaning to watch this Zero Hedge debate for a little bit. I don't know if you guys heard about it, but it's the debate that has Cenk Uygur and what is his name? Cenk Uygur, Dave Smith. It's a very common name. And then on the pro-genocidal Israeli regime side, we have Batya Ungar-Sargon, who is such a hack. I just can't with her. She's such a hack. Her whole shtick is to do oh, I'm like a pro-working class. I care about pushing back on the ruling class, which is why you should vote for Donald Trump, whose whole agenda was to pass tax cuts for the rich. That's like the whole Dave Rubin, fucking grift that they do. And it's so tired. It's so tired, but they're still doing it. So you've got her, and then you have what's his name? What is his name? Dennis Prager, who's also a psycho. Yeah, sorry guys, it's late, but I've been wanting to do this video with you, and it's moderated by Saagar, and it's moderated by Saagar and Enjeti. So let's get into it.
Debate. The topic today is Israel's invasion of Gaza morally justified. We will also be touching on the topic of Iran, anti-Semitism, free speech here in the United States. Just some ground rules I'll lay out to everybody, and also so the audience understands. I'm going to be an aggressive moderator. I will cut people off. However, I just want to make it sure at the top we can agree everything will be civil. No crosstalk, if possible. Try not to cut each other off. Definitely no ad hominem attacks. That's going to be a total no-go, and absolutely be cutting that. I'm not going to be enforcing time limits in terms of responses, and I do encourage both interaction, asking questions to each other. If we do ask a question, I'm going to request both that it's actually answered and it's engaged in a respectful manner, and I will be jumping in there a little bit. In general, I have questions that can help guide, but I really would like to leave it up to everybody here. And so I think with that, I'm going to offer some opening statements. I'll give everybody, let's say, a couple of minutes, like 3 minutes or so. And so with that, I think we should go ahead and start. We'll start with you, Dennis.
Yeah, don't let it be like the fucking Piers Morgan debate panels where he just lets people scream, lets the Zionists scream over people and then goes, oh, I don't know, come on.
Dennis Prager is the founder of Prager University and the host of the Dennis Prager radio show. On the topic is Israel's invasion of Gaza morally justified? Let's start there, which is the stated topic. Go ahead, sir.
So thank you very much. Thank you all who are watching. By the way, which is my camera? Because I want to talk to the audience.
Go ahead. I think it's
is that it over there? Hi, everybody. Thank you for having me. The dilemma in the Middle East has always been the same from the beginning of Israel's creation in 1948, and that is that its neighbors do not want there to be a Jewish state in their midst. That is the entire problem. One side, as I have put it all of my life, one side wants the other side dead. And in case you were in doubt about it, October 7th should have made that clear. If you really want to have a serious moral...
Okay, I don't want to have to be pausing every single time they say something, because obviously if I pause every single time they say something stupid, we'll be here all night. But I just love that what you're going to hear a lot in this debate, what you're going to hear a lot is the repeated talking points of these people over and over and over again. So many repeated talking points of these people. It's going to be, oh, if the Israelis put down their weapons, there will be no Israel. If the Palestinians put down their weapons, there will be peace. A lot of those old stale talking points you're going to hear over and over and over and over again. Because then he's like, if October 7th was any example of them not wanting us to exist, then, there you have it. There's the proof. Okay, well, by that standard, then Israel is genocidal and psychotic and is proof that they want all the Palestinians dead, because they've killed 10 times the amount of people since October 7th. But anyway.
Debate, and one should, and you're not already committed to the anti-Israel side, I have a question. And I think this question more or less clarifies everything. If Israel announced, we are disarming and we will fight no longer, what would happen? If the Palestinians said, we are disarming and we will fight no longer, what would happen? If you are intellectually honest, you know the answer to the question. The day after Israel announced it disarmed, you would have an October 7th of the entire population of Israel. There would be finally an actual genocide, not the false accusation of Israeli genocide in Gaza. If the Palestinians announced that the next day, or perhaps the next week, there would be peace.
I'm gonna have to
this is the only time, as the little excerpt I saw when I spoke at Oxford and debated this issue, this is the only case in modern history where people believe the democracy, the free state, the state with an opposition press, an opposition party, civil rights for all its citizens, including its 2 million Arab citizens, the peace-loving state, the democracy, is the aggressor, and the police state that tortures its opponents, they're the good guys. That is how inverted it is. I have a theory as to why everything is inverted, and I believe it is because it is the one Jewish state in the world. There are 22 Arab states. There are 52 Muslim states. There are 200 states around about that number all over the world. Only one is targeted for extinction. There is no other state targeted for extinction. Only the one Jewish state.
First of all, they're not targeted for extinction. That's literally so dramatic. Second of all, when they're like, why is Israel treated with a double standard? Why are they expected to do this and that? You know why? Because they're the one treated with all the privileges. Israel's the only one that gets as much foreign aid as they do from us. They get more foreign aid from us than we give any other country. They're also the only ones that are imposing an apartheid state on the Palestinians and that enable the blockade and that keep them in a concentration camp. Maybe that's why. I love how he just says it like Israelis are just these like peace-loving people that are just trying to live, man, but the Arabs just won't let them live. They won't live and let live. It's like, you guys just pretend that you don't occupy them. You just pretend that these are two open societies and the Arabs just hate you as if you guys don't imprison them. And then he's talking about shit being inverted. Lunatic.
State the size of New Jersey. And so that is the issue. One side wants the other side dead, and it has been true since 1948.
All right,
Are you sure you know which side that is, Playboy?
Cenk, why don't we go to you, founder of the Young Turks? Go ahead.
Yeah. So first of all, we should clarify the question, because if we're saying, hey, was Israel right to go in the first place after October 7th? I say yes, but it depends on how, and how long do you stay, how do you conduct affairs, etc. If we're talking about how Israel has conducted this war and whether they should still be in there, that's a hard no. It's not even close. It's been absolutely atrocious what they've done. And not only has it killed over 33,000 Palestinians, with probably a lot more than that inside the rubble, 76,000 wounded, 1.1 million people starving. If you think that that is good for Israel, I think that you ought to have a sanity check. So not only is it devastating for the Palestinians, potentially devastating.
Obviously, I'm sure it's already clear that I'm going to much more be on the side of Jank and Dave Smith. But even some things that Jank and Dave Smith say in the parts of this that I've seen, I don't agree with. I feel like that they're too giving Israel a pass. Like, you'll see. I agree with a lot of what Jank and Dave say, but there are certain things that I feel like they give Israel the benefit of the doubt, or they try to make Israel seem like they have the right to do something when they don't. But anyway.
For the world, as Netanyahu now agitates for a broader war with Iran engulfing the entire Middle East, which will be catastrophic for America and the world. But for Israel itself, if you want to save haven for Jews, you must stop the occupation. 75 long, brutal years. So it's one thing to say, hey...
That's the other thing that no one ever questions or asks. Why do they get their own state all sexy? Why? Like... So you can be a Jewish person from Brooklyn, right? And you can even convert. You don't even have to be born Jewish. And you can just move to Palestine and kick someone out of their house. And you say you're a democracy, but you can't be both. You can't be a democracy and a religious state. Those two things don't go together. You're either a democracy or you're a religious state. You can't be both. And you can't build your safe haven on the graves of other children. How are you supposed to be a safe haven for a group of historically oppressed people by building said safe haven on the graves of those that you murdered in order to give yourself said safe haven? It makes no fucking sense. It makes no sense. But everybody just accepts it. Oh, it's supposed to be a safe haven. It's supposed to be a safe haven. For who? Oh, the democracy that's a religious state? Why do they get an ethno state? How come no one ever asks that? Where are all they just asking questions, folks? You know, all the people that are like, I'm just asking questions. How come you're not asking questions about that?
Theoretically, Hamas would do this. And by the way, I'm then going to say all Palestinians would do that, or all Muslims would do that. That's a dangerous area to go to, right? It's another thing to say, yes, but while they theoretically don't want our state to exist, we're actually preventing their state from existing. I mean, it's such an ironic argument. Hey, we prevented their state for 75 long years. We prevented them from having freedom for 75 long years. We brutalized them in every possible way. We've humiliated them in every possible way. Number one, we can't believe they're fighting back. Are you serious? We'll talk a lot about this in the debate. But so would people have been surprised if Jews fought back against the Germans during World War II? Would that have been terrorism? Is that what it would have been? That's outrageous to say. Of course, Jews should have been able to fight back against the Germans. Any occupied people should be able to fight back. We can go to Armenians fighting back against the Ottoman Empire. Okay, so those are my original people. I'm Turkish descent. And if you said, well, the Armenians, how dare they? They should have loved the Turks. And they should have said the Turks are the greatest people on earth. And they should have been occupied and accepted their occupation. I can't believe they fought back. And you know what? When the Turks moved them and killed them, They're just defending themselves. They have a right to defend themselves. Guys, if you're in that camp, I don't think you understand how biased you sound and how it does not sound to anyone outside of your camp that you're in a rational world. So
True.
if you want Israel to be safe, you must end the occupation. It is not optional. So is the goal here to say, as Netanyahu is clearly saying now, he's saying, I do not want a two-state solution. Permanent occupation means permanent war, permanent terrorism, and a disaster for Israel, let alone the Palestinians.
Got it. Batya, why don't you go ahead? Batya Ungar-Sargon, she is opinion editor at Newsweek, and she's the author of Second Class, How the Elites Betrayed America's Working Men and Women, which we have a copy of on the desk. Right.
LOL. LOL. That's what I was referring to. Her bullshit book. How the elites betrayed the working class. Bitch, don't even get me started on this bitch. Don't even get me started. This is what I can't stand, okay? I can't stand the fraudulent nature of these people. It's like, I can at least, understand or be like, okay, with the right wingers who present themselves as they are. But she's one of the worst people because she pretends to be like heterodox in her thinking. She pretends to care about working class people. All she is a shill apologist for the Israeli regime, a psycho Zionist who literally lies and makes shit up. She was one of the people that kept retweeting lies about the hoaxes that the IOF was putting out. And then she wouldn't take them down when people were calling her out that it was a lie. And then she tries to do the jujitsu of pretending that actually somehow Trump, who did nothing but serve elites, and Sheldon Adelson and Israel while he was in office, is actually for the working class. How? No policy. Like, I don't remember what the exact words were, but she went on Boomer Mar, and her defense that Trump was pro-working class was because he said stuff. Didn't bring up the policies, didn't bring up the fact that he had the worst union record of any president in 50 years, that his National Labor Relations Board was a joke, that he had contempt for workers. No, but because he said stuff, she's like, hey, he's pro-working class. She's so full of shit. She's so full of shit. So just keep that in mind as you hear anything that comes out of this liar's mouth.
Right over there. She was so kind to give us one. Go ahead, Batya. You can go ahead.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so honored to be here with this panel. Are we all in agreement that Israel was just to invade after October 7th? Cenk, you agreed with that. Dennis, you obviously agreed with that. I agree with that. Dave, are you in agreement that that was a just?
Yeah. Okay. See, guys, I told you. I'm sorry. There's so much propaganda. There's so much bullshit. There's so much lies. It's hard not to pause like every 2 seconds and like comment on it. No, we're not all in agreement. They may be in agreement. We're not all in agreement. That's number one. Number two, I feel like I understand why Jank and Saagar don't correct people when they mess up their names because they've gotten it their whole lives. I know because, like, I have family who have unique names and people mess them up and they're just like, I'm not even going to bother correcting them. But it drives me crazy. I'm not one of these people that expects everybody to get everyone's name, get every word right in every different language or culture, whatever. But when it comes to names, I get hung up on names because a name is a name. It's yours. It's what you call people. It's what you introduce yourself as, how people know you. So it drives me crazy when people don't make an effort to pronounce people's names right. Again, not the name of like every country, every town, every whatever, but people. Like, get their names right. It's Jank, like Jenk is how it's pronounced. Or Saagar, that's how it's pronounced. When Saagar was on Boomer Mar, or when Crystal Ball was, he kept calling him Saagar. And somebody calls him Saagar at one point in this too. It's not Saagar, it's not Shank or Sank, it's Jank. Okay, anyway.
I would say, like, Cenk, it depends on what you mean by
What
invade.
followed.
Sure.
But the initial invasion itself, you could see that from a just point, that that would have been justified based on October 7th, based on how they conducted themselves. There's a way that Israel could have conducted itself that you would have felt comfortable with that as a reaction to October 7th. Is that accurate?
Well, I mean, look, if you're spending your opening asking me a question, it's a fairly complex question, but I would certainly say that Israel was more than justified in pursuing and killing anybody who was involved in October 7th.
Why don't we cut the questions there? Continue with your opening statement. Okay.
Well, I think that's very important because then we can narrow the scope of the debate. It doesn't have to be about whether the war is just, but whether Israel's behavior since invading was just and the way that it has carried it out. And I think the answer to that is
not a war. To genocide. To use the word war is so misleading and just malicious because a war implies two standing armies, two militaries, two equal sides. That's not what this is at all. Not even close. Were they morally justified? Why are we talking about morally justified? No, I'll tell you what wasn't morally justified. The fact that these motherfuckers knew that this attack was being planned and they did nothing. And yet Netanyahu still sits at the head of the government. Let's talk about that.
Very clearly, yes, because first of all, the measures that Israel has taken, obviously we look at the destruction and it is horrifying. We see these children, we see women, we see people being impacted in the most horrific way, and it looks horrible. But the reality is that war is horrible. And the thing that we have to determine is Israel engaged in a war or in war crimes, right? Is Israel engaged in a justified
We already know the answer to that. It's war crimes. Again, you hear this a lot from genocide apologists. They'll go, yes, 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 I know that it's horrible that we're seeing babies having their heads blown off and stuff, but like, listen, man, war's ugly. Like you'll hear them say that a lot. No, again, this is not a war. This is a genocide. This is purposeful. They're doing forced famine. They're imprisoning children. They're sniping people because they stepped into the wrong zone, massacring people while they try to get flour. And when she says, are they conducting this war, this genocide in a just way? It's like these people don't realize that we have social media. Like maybe you guys should have consulted with the IOF before and told them that they shouldn't be posting their war crimes on TikTok. Because that's how we've seen a lot of this. A lot of what we've seen, some of the most horrific shit that we've seen, was not something that was put out by mainstream media or the left or the communists or Hamas. It was stuff that I saw on the IOF official social media channels. Stuff that I saw them post themselves. Stuff that I saw Israeli officials from the Likud posting on Twitter. Okay? So don't give me this, are they conducting this war in a just way? Or are they committing war crimes? We know the answer to that. And apparently you haven't been watching social media. But for all of those of us who have, we already know the answer to that.
To a heinous attack, or is it going and doing things that are beyond the pale? And the evidence seems to suggest that Israel is not only behaving in a way that every other army has behaved in a very similar situation, but in a much more careful way, despite the massive destruction. And the evidence for that is in the efforts that they have made, the millions and millions of phone calls they make. You understand that Israel telegraphs to the enemy before every single thing that it does.
It's so amazing. Again, it's all the same talking points. They honestly, they need to refresh them. Seriously, they need to refresh their talking points to their handlers or whatever fucking lobbyist that is consulting them, because these talking points are so tired. Oh man, you guys, the Israeli government is so moral. They drop flyers right before they bomb you to let you know that they're about to bomb you. Aren't they nice? They're the most moral army in the world. They're conducting the most moral atrocities, you know? They're conducting the most moral genocide on a besieged population that is trapped, that can't get out, that's in a cage, and that is stuck in the space that is smaller than the Las Vegas Strip. But they're so moral and they let them know.
In Gaza, they're literally giving away the plan in order to get civilians out of harm's way. Now, can more be done? More can always be done. But have they gone further than any army in human history? The answer is yes. The number 33,000. Last week, Hamas put out...
No, they haven't, actually. Even the U.S. government, our U.S. government, known for doing a lot of atrocities and carrying out a lot of atrocities, especially during the Vietnam and the Iraq War, didn't even drop 2,000-pound bombs during Afghanistan. That's not a defense of the American army. That's just to show that the Israeli army is actually just that psychotic and genocidal, that they're going even further than the U.S. government and the U.S. army did. But no, in her deluded mind, she's like, no, they go above and beyond. Delusional.
A statement on Telegram in which they said they cannot account for 11,000 of those. So Hamas itself reduced the number to 22,000, which means that if you take the number of Hamas soldiers who have been killed, right? Israel says 13,000. Hamas itself in February admitted to 6,000.
Semantics. Also, the numbers thing, first of all, they're psychopaths, because whenever we talk about the number of Palestinians, which is well over probably 50,000 now, because they were saying it was 30,000 2 months ago, okay? It's like I saw somebody tweet this, and I can't remember who the account was, but they said something to the effect of, and it's true. Yeah, it's not that the numbers stopped going up. It's that they killed all the record keepers. So It's well over. We were at 32,000 months ago. But then on top of that, they try to get bogged down in these semantics of like, oh, well, how many were Hamas militants? Well, we know for a fact that you guys implemented AI software in order to ensure, called like daddy, something daddy, where to ensure that if a Hamas militant was going to get killed, they waited for him to go home to be with women and children before they bombed them so they could kill all of them. So this idea that they're going out of their way to protect civilians is ridiculous. And they don't know how many Hamas members they've even killed because, again, they count militants and terrorists as anyone male. So if you're a boy, you're an 11-year-old boy, you're Hamas.
We're talking about a
This
ratio of
whole
combatants to
thing is
non-combatants
bullshit.
that, again, simply has not been seen in urban warfare. All of these things, I think, come together to suggest that despite the enormous devastation, and I'm with you on that emotionally, we have to analyze this objectively and conclude that if you are saying 33,000 as the number of dead, you are mourning the butchers. And I think that's shameful. I think it's really important that people who are mourning the civilians make sure that they are careful, that they are not mourning exactly what we all have agreed on, which is that the butchers, Israel had every right, not just every right, but a moral right and a moral obligation.
Okay, so if we're going to play that game and that's going to be the standard, then you need to revise down that 1,200 number of Israelis who got killed on October 7th to like 800. Because a couple hundred, 350, something like that, were soldiers. So if you're going to count anybody who could be a Hamas militant as somebody who we should not mourn and count amongst the dead, then what's good for the goose is good for the gander, bitch. So then we don't need to mourn any of the soldiers then because they're terrorists. So Hamas are terrorists, but the IOF is not terrorist? No. You don't get to play that game. One standard. And the terrorists are the ones who are doing the occupying. So yeah, we won't count them then.
To kill them.
Got it. Thank you, Batya. Dave, you can go ahead. Comedian, and he's host of the Part of the Problem podcast. Go ahead, Dave.
Sure. Well, since we have a short opening here, I think I'll just respond to a couple things that I've heard you guys say so far. So one of the things that I notice almost in every war is that it kind of drives people down to this most base collectivist understanding of what's going on here. You know, this side is bad, this side is good, and no one really sees the nuance that there are individuals involved. So, for example, just in the war between Ukraine and Russia, you see people who have the Ukrainian flag in their Twitter bio, and they celebrate when there's a Russian defeat, never really considering the fact that many of these Russian young boys were conscripted into this army, and that they're victims too.
True.
And you know, when Mr. Prager says one side wants peace and the other side wants to kill all of these people, it's a very convenient collectivist way to look at things. But the objective reality of the situation here is that there have been atrocities on both sides committed against the other side. This is true throughout the history of the existence of Israel. This is true before the existence of the state of Israel, with the Zionist settlers, the British, the Arabs. There were atrocities committed on all sides. And to say that everybody, as if, or to imply that everybody on the Israeli side just wants peace, and everybody on the Palestinian side just wants, that is just not true. There are lots of Palestinians who just want peace, and there are lots of Israelis who want their land and are quite willing and will openly, explicitly say they're willing to do whatever it takes to take their land. Now, to your point about, I mean, you said every single strike they're warned. No, that is just not true. That's objectively not true. They do warn sometimes, but then that also leads to the question of, does that mean that whatever you do is just okay? The reality is that this is not just a war like any other war. And that doesn't mean other wars are justified necessarily, but there's a very big difference in this war compared to almost any other war we could think of. And the major difference that I see is that Israel has dominated the Palestinian people since at least 1967, and we could probably go back before that. Let me just say this. If we look at things in not a collectivist way, and we recognize that there are individuals, and these individuals make up different groups. Let's say we have the group that is Hamas, made up of individuals, but that's Hamas. Within that group, we have the militant Hamas, and we have the political arm of Hamas. They're different. We also have Israel, which is made up of its citizens. We have different political parties within Israel. Okay, let's take this one group for a second. The innocent Palestinians. I hope both of you would concede that such a group does exist. There are some people on the pro-Israel side who will explicitly tell you that that group does not exist. I think if we're being honest with ourselves, there is no group that has been more victimized than the innocent Palestinians. And at a certain point, maybe we ought to think about that group. Nobody has been through it worse than that group, the innocent Palestinians. And at a certain point, I think the question needs to be asked, does Israel have a right to do what it's been doing to the innocent Palestinians for many, many decades now?
Great. Thank you guys very much. You all stayed within the time.
A question that no one ever asks. It's always all, does Israel have the right to defend itself? But never like, well, what about the Palestinians? Do they not have a right to defend themselves? You know what I'm saying?
Which is actually incredible. And Batya did steal a little bit of my thunder because, and I'm big glad that you answered that question. Dave and Jank both responded in that way about how exactly what the question and the superimpose upon that is that do we agree that Israel at least either had a right or was justified in taking some action as a result of October 7th? So my question, I think, to both of you, and both of you can feel free to chime in after both of them has responded, is if we look at the original statements for the war and for the invasion, is that the Israeli military was supposed to accomplish a few objectives. Number one, they had to destroy Hamas, the militant terrorist organization. Two, they had to lead to the
destroy Hamas, which again has no actual meaning. Like that doesn't mean anything. There's no, you can't just destroy Hamas. Like that's not a thing. And they know it's not a thing. They know that that's not a realistic objective.
The
Sorry, I
release
got
of the
cold.
hostages. And 3, they had to make sure that on October 7th
Mm.
could never happen again. So in the conduct of the war so far, do you believe that they have been successful with those objectives? Dennis, why don't you go ahead and go first?
None of us knows yet. Israel is being prevented by much of the world. And I feel that on this entire issue, I'm living in a make-believe world.
Oh my
Every analogy could have been applied to Nazi Germany. There were innocent Germans who were killed.
First of all, they literally say everything is Nazi Germany. Literally. They call everything Nazi Germany. And they say that as a way to explicitly excuse their atrocities on the Palestinian people. It's really despicable. And it's disgusting and disrespectful to the memory of all the people that were killed in the Holocaust. That's number one. Number two, I like how he's like, they're living in an alternate universe. You know what I'm saying? No, bro, you live in an alternate universe. You keep saying that Israel is, they always act like Israel is acting on its own and it has no help. Bro, Biden has done like 100 weapons transfers to Israel since this started. We've given them well over $100 billion to kill more Palestinians. But to you, they're alone. No one's helping them. Delusional.
By the Allies in the bombing and in invasions and so on. No one denies that. But to point out that there were innocent Germans while the Nazis were in charge is a morally idiotic point. It means nothing. It only means that every innocent German's life that was taken is the responsibility of the Nazis. Every innocent Palestinian life that has been taken is the responsibility of Hamas or Hezbollah. That's it. The analogy is perfect. There is one difference between Hamas and the Nazis. And I never called any group in my 40 years of radio Nazi. I never called an individual that other than the Nazis of the 1940s. But there is only one difference between Hamas and the real Nazis of Germany. The Germans hid their atrocities. Hamas boasts and videos them.
Batya, go ahead.
I think that they have, I would say,
that's needless to say, a really psychotic thing to say, because Hamas only exists because of the Israeli occupation. Comparing Hamas to Nazis and then acting like the Nazis were the better of the two is insane. And again, super disrespectful to victims of the Holocaust. Not only do they lie constantly about the things that they claim Hamas did, Hamas boasts their atrocities. Oh, you mean all the ones you made up? You mean those? You mean the ones that you claim were all on video, but you can't provide that video? You mean all the shit that you just laundered and all the hoaxes you guys created that have no proof? You mean those? Hamas were not trying, they're not a global organization. They only exist because of the Israeli occupation.
destroying Hamas, definitely. They're not going to get every single one, but the idea that Yahya Sinwar will ever breathe open air again seems to me very far-fetched. I think they have
You got bigger problems than Sinwar, bro.
him underground forever. And, you know, they cut off the head. And
Yeah.
the idea that Hamas will be able to regroup at this point seems to me very unlikely. The release of the hostages, no, they failed on that front. I think they tried. Maybe they could have tried harder. I think, unfortunately, I hate to say this, but I think a lot of them are dead.
They didn't try.
So let's say about that. But I
They
think
didn't
that-
try. Netanyahu made very clear very early in the war, he didn't give a fuck about the hostages. And that was before they killed 3 of them. They don't care. They don't care. That's why they've turned Gaza into a parking lot. They know that the hostages are in the Gaza Strip. They don't care.
obviously failed.
They would rather, and this is like, has been talked about before in other writings about the way Israel's military operates, about the Hannibal Directive, and how they would rather kill their own people than they would have them being held hostage. So,
As to another October 7th, I think a lot of that has to do with what we're seeing now in terms of the realignment happening in the Middle East, to where you see Saudi Arabia clinging to the idea that they too will be able to join the Abraham Accords at some point. The moderate Sunni and Gulf states rush to Israel's defense amazingly to protect them from these Iranian rockets. And to me, that is, you know, I mean, I don't think this is a moral question so much as a strategic one. And I'm sure we're going to get into where does the United States fit into all this? Where do we want the United States to fit into all this? But from that point of view, and Iran-backed October 7th, should it happen again, is going to happen in a very different Middle East, one in which Israel has a lot of support from the Arab nations, and that makes it less likely as well, I believe.
I'm just kind of I'm blown away by the statement that Mr. Prager just made, that the only difference he can see between the Nazis and Hamas is that the Nazis hid their atrocities. So if that's the only difference you can see, I have a few others that pop to mind. The Nazis were a government. The Nazis had an army. The Nazis had an air force. The Nazis had submarines. The Nazis controlled from France to Poland in all of Europe, whereas Hamas can't even control Gaza effectively. I mean, I find the statement that you can't see any differences between the Nazis killed over. Well, okay, but hold on. You said that wasn't what you said. What you said is that you can't see a difference. The Nazis, okay, but yes, I see a moral difference. The Nazis killed over 10 million people outside of the war conflict, just in terms of people that they killed, let alone the tens of millions of people who you might hold them responsible for. So yes, I do see a moral difference between the two. I'm not saying October 7th was horrifically immoral, but if you're going to say, do you see a moral difference, that would be like if somebody had murdered two people and you went, I see no difference between that and the Nazis. Oh, okay, yes, they're both immoral, but there's enormous differences between the two. Now,
it's so bad faith what Dennis Prager is doing. Yeah, but do you see a moral difference? Moral to who? Moral to who? You guys are defending some of the most immoral shit anyone's ever fucking seen. And you want to talk about what's moral and who's moral? Fuck out of here.
To the other point of the idea of, can Israel eliminate Hamas, even if they were, which I don't think is feasibly possible, that they eliminated everybody who is a member of Hamas. I mean, in order to do this, you would have to look at, if the images of Gaza City aren't enough, you would have to look at images 5 times over of that. And this is going to result in just slaughtering innocent people, not to mention the excess mortality where hundreds of thousands of people are going to die as a result of this in the future. But even then, you would just be dealing with another Hamas-like group. Because if you don't understand what creates this problem to begin with, look, this is the problem. This happens all throughout history, all throughout the world. If you want, there's a reason why the Nazis only rose. First, it was after we imposed Versailles. But then, as you know, it was after the Great Depression, when there was hyperinflation, when things go terrible, that's when the worst, most violent extremist groups rise. And that's what the future is going to be, unfortunately.
Just very briefly to that? Something really staggering has happened in Gaza since October 7th, which is there have been protests against Hamas for the first time there were protests actually recently in 2019, but they were quashed by Hamas in a very aggressive, violent way. But the people of Gaza, the innocent people of Gaza, yes, who you mentioned, are speaking out against Hamas because Hamas is stealing their food and their aid, and they are seeing, they've known all.
Okay, so if you're Palestinian and you see this and you live in Gaza, I want to know your thoughts on this, because I have not seen this at all. What I've seen is actually polling saying that the people of Gaza and people in the West Bank broadly support Hamas. But she's claiming that there's this supposed uprising against Hamas in Gaza. I don't know. I've seen no evidence of that. Again, if you are Palestinian or you live in Gaza or in the West Bank, let me know what you guys think of that statement.
Along the role Hamas plays in their oppression, but the fact that Hamas has lost support in Gaza since October 7th while gaining support massively in the West Bank, right? Which speaks to how different the Palestinian populations are in the different areas. I just don't buy it that Israel is creating more and more Hamases and Hamases and Hamases. I think that there's
that's great that you don't buy it, but you are creating more Hamas, because with your continued genocidal campaign, you will always be creating more resistance. And as long as there is oppression and a blockade and an occupation, there will be resistance, whether you call it Hamas or not.
Evidence that
I like it's like wildly different populations. Like, what are you trying to say?
The opposite is happening, that the people of Gaza are seeing, we have to get out of this cycle.
Go ahead, Dennis.
I hate to put it this way, but I mean it sincerely, so I will. You are on record now, because the internet has a permanent memory.
I'm aware
of saying that there's no comparison morally between Hamas and the Nazis.
No, you changed. You changed what I said a little bit.
No. Wait. So
no, I didn't say that.
Wait. All right, you don't. So you think morally they are similar? Yes or no?
You said I can't see anything different about them.
Yes, everyone knows I'm talking more.
He really thinks he nailed that.
Of course, Hamas does not control the same number of countries.
Mr. Prager, what's beautiful about the internet is what you just said. It is on record, so people can see what I said.
There is no moral difference between the Nazis and Hamas. Both want to exterminate Jews. That is what we're talking about, not whether or not the Hamas has taken over Czechoslovakia. That's an irrelevant point to what I made. There is no moral distinction. Hamas would like to butcher every Jew in Israel, maybe in the world, I don't know, but certainly in Israel. It's in their charter, and that's what they announced. They're proud of October 7th. They're proud of rape. They are proud of burning Jewish families. And the Nazis were proud, but the Nazis hid it, and Hamas boasts about it. That's the one difference.
See, this is what I mean when I say the comparison to the Nazis is, again, not only disrespectful to the memory of those who suffered during the Holocaust, but again, totally made up. There is no evidence, I repeat, no evidence of mass rapes or burning of babies or burning of families or any of the other hoaxes that their propaganda machines created after October 7th. There is a reason why they refuse to show that video. Why don't they make that video, the one about October 7th that they compiled of all the Hamas atrocities? Why don't they make it public? They don't make it public, and they only selectively do screenings for it. Why would you do that? Why wouldn't you just show everybody? And the reason why they don't is because there is no evidence of what they're claiming. That's not to say that Hamas didn't kill people on October 7th. They did. But they didn't have tanks. When you see the videos and the pictures of Israelis that were burned to death by tanks and by Apache helicopters, yeah, that came from the IOF. because Hamas did not have those capabilities that day. They had guns. And there is no evidence that of the people that they killed, that there were ever decapitated babies, which already got debunked, or burned whole families, or mass rapes. All of that was made up by the Israeli propaganda machine. All of it. And if you want to go find more of it, the Electric Intifada has reported on it. Z-Squirrel has like a million threads on it that are very illuminating and break down all of these lies. The Gray Zone has reported on this. So much of what they said was just straight up made up by Israeli propaganda outlets.
Again, that's the one difference. See,
Yes.
you make the point again. That's not the one difference. There's other differences also. Go ahead. Go ahead.
This is Alice in Wonderland. If anybody watched this debate and they didn't know what was happening in the world, they would think, oh my God, I guess Hamas is this giant power and it's been abusing Israel this entire time. Poor little tiny Israel. And Hamas is this gigantic power crushing Israel. What are you guys talking about? Hamas has got pea shooters. They did terrible damage on October 7th. Now Israel's done 30 times worse to the civilians. They've massacred civilians after civilians after civilians. Israel is Goliath. It is not David. It is the Germans in terms of military power. It is not the Jews. The Palestinians are the equivalent of the Jews during the Holocaust. They have been put into ghettos and they have said, you have no freedom. You will serve us and serve us only. And right now they're saying, we're going to have permanent occupation. And wait, so are the Jews not supposed to fight back against the Germans? Do the Palestinians, hold on. Do the Palestinians not have a right to defend themselves? Does it only go one way, where Israel can crush? And how dare you lowly Palestinians fight back? How dare you? Now we'll kill 30 times more of you and we'll occupy you forever and ever and ever. And we're supposed to accept that? Are you guys nuts? They're never going to accept it. Never, ever. Batya, I love you, but if you think that the Palestinians are now more anti-Hamas and more pro-Israel, you have lost your mind. They despise Israel. And they will fight. And hold on, this is the most important point. They are going to fight Israel forever, not because they hate the Jews. Oh my God, they're Nazis. Oh, for no reason at all. They were just walking by and all these Jews came by and they hate them. No, they took their land and they still have it. They have them under their thumb. They can cut off the water, the power, the food, and they have, and they're starving them to death. And you think that, what, they just coincidentally hate the Jews and that's their driving ideology? No, they're fighting you because you're occupying them. This is the most obvious thing in the world. Why did the Armenians fight the Turks? Why did the Greeks fight the Turks? Why did everyone fight the Turks at the end of World War I and the end of the Ottoman Empire? Not because they hate the Turks, but because we were occupying them. And if the Greeks said we want to kill them all, which they did, that did not give us a right to go back into Greece, occupy Greece for 75 years ago. How dare you defend yourself? You hate Turks. We got to kill you forever.
All right, we'll pick up on that because this is a legitimate question.
Okay, I want to point out everything that Jank said there was spot on, everything. But I also want to point out that Jank gets so much hate from like people on the left or like leftists or whatever. He gets so much hate. But I love Jank. I think Jank is great. And I actually love what a lot of people on the left hate him for and what a lot of liberals hate him for. And that is that he's over the top and passionate and yells and bangs the table and is kind of like a little like does like a little bit of an Alex Jones thing. I'm not saying he's like Alex Jones, he's not, but like he's very like animated, and I think and he does yell and he's passionate, and I think that puts a lot of liberals off and even a lot of leftists because they think that they're like above that and they think that's aggressive. They don't like it. But I actually think it's great. I think it's useful. And I like his passion. So I agreed also with everything that he said there. He's right. They say it like, the way that they talk about it is if Arabs in Palestine, Palestinians just hate Jewish people for no reason, They hate them. It's like they used to say about us on Morning Blow. They'd be like, man, Muslims just hate us because they hate us. They hate us because of our freedom. It's like, no. No, the reason why they hate you is because you keep them in an open air prison. The way that they talk about it, I just saw that one hack who's like doing her, as we talked about, right-wing turn, all these quote unquote lefties who kind of like try to shift slowly into becoming full-on right-wingers. It's like, it's an actual cottage industry. It's a whole thing. It's a whole grift, whole cottage industry. Brianna Wu is on that arc now where she's like slowly turning into a right winger and getting onto that arc. So she's been doing propaganda for the Israeli regime for the last month. And one of the things that she keeps saying is like, oh, well, she makes it seem like Palestinians are just mad because 100 years ago their land got taken and they can't move on from it. Like, that's how she talks about it. That's how she tweets about it. Like, the Palestinians are just bitter and everybody else moved on and they have their freedom. But they're just angry and they just can't let go of the fact that they lost the war in 48. Like, she literally said that. But that's not accurate at all. This wasn't a war the Palestinians lost 80 years ago and they haven't moved on. This is an ongoing, still happening today, genocide, war, ethnic cleansing. They are still being occupied. They still don't control their water. They still don't control their electricity. They have no freedom of movement. There's checkpoints everywhere. There's no due process for them. This isn't a thing of the past that people just aren't getting over. This is ongoing in 2024. Don't ever let anybody lie to you about that.
Just as he named you, you can go ahead and ask, what does legitimate Palestinian self-defense, if there is such a thing, even in your eyes, look like?
Right. Well, so that's what I would ask Cenk. Is everything that happened on October 7th legitimate resistance because the Palestinians are occupied?
Great question. So I condemn Hamas for killing civilians. I also condemn the IDF for killing civilians. And now the IDF has killed 30 times the number of civilians that Hamas did. And I know you guys are going to dispute the numbers because that's a very classic thing that people on the oppressor side do.
How many Hamas soldiers do you think have been killed? I just want to number. How many Hamas soldiers?
So first of all, in terms of the numbers, I go with what is internationally recognized by news organizations and human rights groups. So those groups say, no question, that the health ministry, if anything has been conservative, well over 33,000 dead overall. They do not know how many of those are Hamas. Israel's at one point made up a number, like, hold on, let me just finish. I'm almost done. At one point, the IDF made up a number 13,000. And then a couple of weeks later, they changed it to 9,000. So it was obvious that it was made
Why
up.
does it matter? They don't know. This is just a distraction. They don't know how many Hamas members have been killed. That's why they just keep making it up. But then they try to do propaganda and say that the Hamas-run health ministry is making up their numbers when actually they're being conservative. I don't even think they've counted the 400 bodies that they found under Nasser Hospital in Khan Yunis that the Israeli regime just murdered a few weeks ago. They haven't even counted them in those numbers.
Do I trust the 9,000 number? No, because IDF, everything they have said so far has been disproven by news organizations and human rights organizations. So I don't know what the number of Hamas it killed is, but it is a tiny number. And based on the numbers, even if you took the IDF numbers, the 9,000, already the civilian to military ratio is significantly worse for the IDF than it was for Hamas. So if Hamas are dirty terrorists who went and killed those poor civilians along with the soldiers that they killed, well, then the IDF is also obviously terrorists.
Cenk, do you accept Hamas's number that 6,000 of its soldiers? Accept Hamas's number that 6,000 of its soldiers have been killed?
Oh, sure. Yeah.
Okay, so you believe Hamas?
Because they're going to. No. I don't believe Hamas. I'm saying that at a minimum.
Okay.
Because Hamas could be underestimated, but they're not going to overestimate.
I mean, okay, fine. So, I mean, I sort of object morally to taking Hamas at its word and then assuming that the IDF.
I object morally to taking Israel at its word. It's a far worse oppressor.
Let's get to an average. How about
True.
8,000? Whatever it is. What is the civilian to combatant ratio that you would have accepted in this war? Is it 0? Like, what is the civilian to combatant ratio that you would have accepted as moral and just?
So when you look at the scope of conflicts across the world, not in the past, but in this day and age, after World War II and the law of war crimes were put into place, there are, generally speaking, some ratios that people find awful but acceptable. It's usually well under 2 to 1. So, for example, America would not drop 2,000-pound bombs. They wouldn't even drop 500-pound bombs in Fallujah when they were cornered. Israel's wantonly dropping 2,000 bombs all over the place, and that is why they have a worse civilian to military kill ratio than Hamas. So do you acknowledge, okay, let me ask you back, do you acknowledge that Israel's worse terrorist than Hamas because they're killing more civilians both as a raw number and as a ratio?
No, Cenk, because
the point that he's trying to make is what does legitimate defense on the Israeli parts look like? And this is actually something I'd like to hear.
See how they manipulate too and try to change the subject and get bogged down on things that don't matter? The question was, what does, if any, Palestinian defense look like? Their right to defend themselves. And she turns that around and goes, what is an acceptable ratio for you? What in this war is an acceptable ratio of death for you? And his answer was good because, yeah, the American government never even dropped 2,000-pound bombs. In Gaza's much more densely populated, much smaller. But that was her way of trying to get around and not answer the question of what does Palestinian defense look like? Because they don't believe Palestinians are entitled to defense at all.
Yeah. Well, we get to go.
I'm sorry.
Well, I don't believe that you don't distinguish between intentionally targeting women with rape, babies, children, families intentionally being dismembered.
Again, see, made up. That's the other thing that annoys me about this debate on the side of Dave Smith and Jank. They don't actually dispute or push back on any of those lies. They just take them at face value. Dismemberment, rape, burning, killing babies, all this shit. What she is saying about the quote-unquote rapes and dismemberment of babies and stuff has already been debunked. It has already been investigated and debunked. But they continue to say it because they want to legitimize the genocide. That's what she's doing right there. Jank, I don't believe that you think that intentionally carrying out a mass rape campaign and the beheading of babies is the same thing of accidentally blowing up a mosque or accidentally killing an entire family in Gaza, right? That was already debunked. It was already debunked. But Jank and Dave Smith just accept that which is maddening. But again, she does it for propaganda. Because if you can convince people that what happened on October 7th was intentional targeting with mass rape and beheaded babies, then it's easier to justify the actual atrocities and the actual war crimes that the IOF are intentionally carrying out on the Palestinians. I'm going to need you to dispense with this bullshit of the IOF, oh, they're just accidentally killing people. They're just accidentally dropping bombs on children. They're just accidentally blowing up whole refugee camps. They're just accidentally sniping people. It's all an accident, They're moral. That's the undergirding philosophy of this, that the Israelis are moral. So then when they murder you, it's a moral murder. But the Palestinian Arabs, well, they're just dirty terrorists. So, everything they do is intentional. You got that?
Don't believe that you think that is morally equivalent to an army that is targeting combatants. You think those are the same morally?
No. Don't put words in my mouth. Let me just address that. No, I have to address that.
I'm saying I don't believe that you think those are the same.
No. First of all, we're talking about two different things here. So when you say, hey, do you condemn and do you find it morally acceptable they killed the children and the rape, etc.? Of course not. That's totally morally unacceptable. But if you say, hey, Israel does not target civilians, that is, I'm sorry, but I think it's a comical point of view. And so they definitely, by the way, this is really important though. When Hamas kills a baby, we all condemn it. Israel's now killed 15,000 children. And you know what they did? They crushed their skulls, they lit them on fire, and they burned them to death. And you know how they did that? With 2,000-pound bombs.
You want to answer the legitimate
And they did it on purpose.
Wrap this up, and then I want to get to Dennis as well, and Dave, because they both haven't had a chance to talk.
Resistance that targets, if Hamas had only targeted military, we would be having a totally different conversation.
Agreed.
Okay? I think we would agree on that.
Yeah.
Resistance that happens in the West Bank that is nonviolent. I have a very dear friend who's the head of a nonviolent resistance movement in the West Bank. His life is impossible because of the double standard, the double legal standard between Palestinians and Israelis, which is
I have Arab.
Of course, that is totally. No, you don't know anything about it.
No, I appreciate you acknowledging that.
That is totally legitimate resistance. Military targets, nonviolent resistance, BDS. I don't like it. I find it offensive. I find it a double standard, whatever. I support the right of people to resist through boycotts. That's like a time-honored American tradition. These are all legitimate forms. We're using rape as a tool of war, not legitimate. And we all agree on that, by the way. So I don't think we disagree about this. It's just when you say that the occupation led to October 7th, it sounds like you're saying that it is justified by the oppression.
One second. Dennis, I want to get back to. So I asked originally what legitimate Palestinian self-defense, if it even exists in your mind, looks like. I would like for Dennis to be able to.
Legitimate Palestinian self-defense would be, we no longer want to destroy Israel. Let's make peace. They were offered a state 5 times and they rejected it. Bill Clinton thought that Arafat was a phony, and he did everything possible at Camp David to give them a state. They don't want a state. They want to destroy Israel. And as regards Palestinians, how's this that none of you like to talk about? There are 2 million Palestinians in Israel as Israeli citizens with the same rights as Jews have in Israel. And not only that, they're pro-Israel. They are more pro-Israel since October 7th than they have ever been. And that is according to Arab sources in Israel. They're occupied. Why aren't they occupied? Why are 2 million Arabs in Israel so happy to be in Israel? Why? Answer that question.
Well,
if Israel wants to commit genocide against, you say genocide all the time. So why are, I'm asking you both.
I do like that idea of being like, oh, well, there are actually some Palestinians who live in Israel who aren't in a concentration camp. Gotcha. You're not making the point you think you're making, Playboy.
Yes, I don't distinguish between the two of you.
Okay, I will quote your debate partner. You don't know anything about me. I have oftentimes said that it is true that I would certainly say that I do think, well, I wouldn't say they have exactly equal rights, the Arab citizens of Israel. If you were to be a random Arab citizen of any country in the Middle East, I think you'd rather be a citizen of Israel than a citizen of anywhere else.
Is important.
I 100% agree. That is important. And let me tell you something. If you were going to be a citizen in the United States of America or under Saddam Hussein's Iraq, you would much rather be a citizen in the United States of America. That doesn't justify the war in Iraq. That's the point. It is important. I give Israel a lot of credit. Israel is a great country. By the way, I think the entire Zionist experiment is really amazing when you think about it. That a group of Eastern European Jews sat down and said, we've been through so much that we want to form our own country in a land that we've never been to. We want to base it around a language that we don't speak. We want to get international financing. We want to get all this. And they pulled it off. They actually did it. And they made it a really great place to live for the people who are citizens of Israel. That's not really what's in dispute. The point is that there are 5 million people who are under land that they've controlled since 1967. And at a certain point, you can't just claim, like I've heard people argue, this isn't even really an occupation at this point. This is an annexation. They've taken this land and they basically said at least since...
State 5 times
no, I do not. No, I do not. And I'll respond to that. Okay, fine. So let me respond to that. Yeah. So you just said that you were talking about Camp David 2. In 2000, you said Arafat was offered everything and he turned it down. 2 things I'll say on that real quick. Okay, number 1, Shlomo Ben-Ami, who was the acting foreign minister at the time in these negotiations, he said himself in his book, and he said it on an interview in Democracy Now!, that if he was Arafat, he'd have turned the deal down too. And I highly recommend one book that I'll recommend for everyone to read, The Truth About Camp David, written by Clayton Swisher. This guy was a security guard there. He went around, interviewed everybody involved for 3 years after the fact. I highly recommend people read that book. The truth is that, yes, Bill Clinton threw Arafat under the bus after the negotiations, but Arafat wanted to continue the negotiations. The Israelis said no, and the Americans said no. That's a fact.
Go ahead.
Yeah, no. Okay, so this is an excellent example. My motto on my 40 years of radio has been, I prefer clarity to agreement. We don't agree, but it is clear. You think the security guard at Camp David is a reliable source, and Clinton made it up that Arafat was responsible for rejecting it.
I don't think that I don't think that Jeffrey Epstein's rapist friend is a reliable source. Yes, agreed. I actually do trust Clayton Swisher. Yes.
Okay, that's fine. Okay. I don't like Clinton at all, but
I knew I'd get you on
Clinton,
that.
well, you didn't get me. We happen to agree about Clinton's moral character as it developed. Certainly, okay. But the issue, no. Okay. So your claim is that they were not offered a state. Is that correct? Tell me yes or no. I don't understand.
It's not that they weren't offered a state. Yeah. It's that what they were offered, and by the way, we can listen to Netanyahu when he doesn't realize he's being recorded, and he's bragging about how much he fooled Bill Clinton because he put all these poison pills in the agreement, and therefore they would never really get a state. What they offered them was nothing that really looks like a state. It was you can have technically 96% of it, but there's Israeli controls all throughout it, and all these different sections are divided against each other.
So here's the big picture. I'll be very, very quick. The average Israeli would do anything to get the hell out of the West Bank and to have peace with their neighbors. That is what Israelis care about. They want to raise their kids. They want to have peace. They want to have prosperity. They want to keep producing the most advanced.
They treat the people that live in the occupied West Bank like animals. Worse. The occupied West Bank is supposedly free, and they have checkpoints everywhere, and they just do extrajudicial killings and torture, and it's insanity. Like, this idea that they really just want to get out of the West Bank lies.
Medicines in the world, as the Israeli medical industry does, they don't want to occupy Arabs. It was forced upon them. It was forced upon them in 1967. And one final key point: how the Hamas and Hezbollah and Iran and others all say all of Israel is occupied land, not the West Bank, not Gaza. Israel is occupied Palestinian land. That is what from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free means. No Israel.
All right, I'm glad you brought that up. We will be getting to the free speech topic on that. Jank, you haven't been able to speak. I saw you objecting about the occupation.
Yeah, there's so many things to object to. Look, guys, I'm not on either side in the sense that I want every Israeli civilian to be protected. I want every Palestinian civilian to be protected. And as a Turk, I'm in kind of the middle here as well, because we also occupied Palestine. We occupied a lot of people, right? So I've been on the Israeli side, and oftentimes when I hear you guys talk, you sound a lot like my Turkish relatives, to be honest. And that's not a great compliment because, and I love my Turkish relatives. Sorry, guys. But when you talk about anything that's related to Turkey, Turks are the most angelic creatures that's ever existed. They never did anything wrong to anybody. Golly gee, them occupying. No, those people wanted to be occupied, et cetera, right? So looking at it, when I look at those peace negotiations, for example, I think that in the beginning, Israel was honestly terrible and violated almost every peace treaty they made. In the middle, they were pretty good. And then at the end, now with Netanyahu over the last 20, 25 years, they've been awful. Okay. So in the middle where they were good, it's actually not the Camp David Accords and the 2000 negotiations. There's other sources. There's one of the lead American negotiators. I believe his name was Robert Malley. I hope I got that right. He said, oh, this was a fraud. We never really presented a real state to the Palestinians. Jimmy Carter said the same thing. So, but Omer actually offered a pretty decent deal to Abbas if it was a real deal. And I think that he should have taken that. I even think that the deal in 2000, it was not great, but they should have tried harder. Arafat should have tried harder to take that deal, because I remember covering it at the time and thinking, guys, I don't think you get it. You have no leverage. America is going to cheat on the side of Israel from time immemorial. They have the greatest military in the history of the world. You guys have no leverage. Just take any deal because you're going to be occupied forever. So I wanted to take a deal, and I wanted to be diplomatic, okay? But in the beginning, but like this idea that Israel is just, oh my God, they just offered everything. And these Arabs, they just always reject peace. That's ridiculous. After 1967, by the way, one of the peace treaty was, hey, Egypt, Syria, Jordan, especially Egypt and Jordan, recognize Israel. And then Israel was supposed to give back the Sinai Peninsula. And it didn't. And that's what led to the 1973 war. So these kind of violations have happened over and over again. So in terms of, and I've got to clarify something that Dennis keeps saying. There's a difference between genocide and Holocaust. So is Israel trying to do a Holocaust of the Palestinians or Muslims or Arabs? No, they're not trying to kill every Muslim or Arab or Palestinian in the world. But that's not what a genocide is. Srebrenica was a genocide. It was 6,000 Muslims killed by the Serbs. They were killed because they were Muslim in the area that they were in. So they were targeted based on their race. The same with the Armenian genocide. Genocide means targeting based on race and usually ethnic cleansing. That is textbook what is happening in West Bank right now. And so when you talk about the Hamas and the Palestinian Authority, Netanyahu wanted to split those two things up so that he could say, and this is, by the way, in the Israeli press, Times of Israel, Haaretz, etc. And the idea there is so that Netanyahu and the right-wingers in Israel can go, oh, we have no negotiating partner. We have no partner for peace because I don't know which one it is. And I know you said Palestinian authorities and Hamas. Oh, look, Hamas is attacking us. Can you believe they're attacking us after 75 years of occupation?
Okay, well, 75 years of occupation. That is exactly the view. I'm glad you said it. That is the view. Israel itself is occupying Palestinian. It has nothing to do with the West Bank and nothing to do with Gaza. You said 75 years. That's how old Israel is.
Yeah. So, but can I clarify? No, because I want two-state solution. I want Israel to be a safe haven.
So what does 75 years of occupation mean?
20 years we're not.
It's a difference.
I just want to know, because as you're pointing out the strategy of Netanyahu to prop up Hamas, which is widely reported, and I saw you nodding at that. I think there's no denying it at this point.
But hold on. And humiliate Hamas at the same time.
Right. So, but let's talk about this a little bit, because I think this all kind of ties together here, and it's one of the points that Dennis just made, where you said, look, Israelis don't want to occupy these territories, and that certainly is true. This is my point about being collectivist versus individuals. That is true for many, many Israelis. There are lots of them who were very happy. They were all behind Yitzhak Rabin. Let's make a deal. We don't want to be occupying these guys anymore, right? But then there's also members of the Likud party and people like Benjamin Netanyahu, and one of the explicit reasons, which he has stated in his own words, and many high-level Israelis, I could read quotes to you guys for the next hour if you want. They've all said it. The reason why they wanted to prop up Hamas was not only, as Cenk said, so that the international community would never recognize Palestinians, but so that those Israeli citizens wouldn't be able to put pressure on them. Because if it was the PA in charge, so many people in Israel would say, hey, they want to make a deal, let's make a deal. And so the Likud party cynically, intentionally funded and propped up this terrorist organization that is every bit as bad as you've said, Mr. Prager. I agree with you on that. But here's the deal, right? So if that's true, which we all know is true, if that's true, that the Likud party...
See, that right there is like another thing. Like I said, for the most part, I agree with the way that Jank and this guy Dave are defending it, but like it's like things like that he says, oh, they're a terrorist organization. Okay. The reason why I take issue with that is because terrorists to who? And if we're going to be calling them a terrorist organization, then we need to call the IOF a terrorist organization because they've killed way more people in way more vicious ways. Also, it is only the West that recognizes them as a terrorist organization. That's it. Just the West recognizes them as a terrorist organization. So they're not by many standards. And he's like, and they're just every bit as bad as you say. Are they though?
Propped up Hamas so they wouldn't face internal pressure and they wouldn't face external pressure to give the Palestinians their freedom, then I'm sorry, that blows up the Israeli defense for this war. That, hey, it sure does suck that we got to kill these innocent people, but we got to get these Hamas. You propped up Hamas so that these innocent people would never get their freedom. You don't then get to use that group as an excuse for why you can slaughter them. Sorry, no reasonable person can defend that.
For the record, so that everyone knows, it was the Palestinian Authority before the word Hamas was ever known. In fact, murdered all the members of the Israeli Olympic team in the Munich 72 Olympics. That this portrayal of the Palestinian Authority minus Hamas as wonderful people is sick.
No, but
that's insane. That's insane. So his defense of that is by saying, oh, well, even if you put Hamas aside, all Palestinians are bad because once upon a time, the PLO was involved in murdering people at Munich. Are you hearing yourself? So because one time the PLO carried out a terrorist attack against the people at the Munich conference, that means that all Palestinians are responsible for that. Again, you guys want to create these standards. I don't think that you really should want to create because you don't want to live by those standards.
That's such a cheap cop out to point to one atrocity in history. It is an atrocity.
All the blown up buses, all the blown up.
Exactly what he said. Sorry, I'm kind of like, it's very hot. It's very hot in my apartment. I'm kind of feeling like a little out of it, but like, yeah, what he said, pointing to one atrocity as is such a cheap trick.
What happened yesterday? That was all Israel just murdered 15,000. Saagar, can I say one thing? One thing quickly. Sorry. All right. So just point to one atrocity and then say get a jail free card.
It is objectively true that there has been atrocities that have been committed by the PLO and also by members, not necessarily the Israeli government, but certainly the paramilitary organization. Sometimes the Israeli government as well. Batya, I do want to get the response.
He's like, yeah, no, Saagar. He's like, not the Israeli government. No, literally, yes. I'm glad Jank pushed back on that. And it's like, no, actually, yes, by the Israeli government. Yes. And but one time the PLO carried out, an atrocity at Munich. So I guess those 50,000+ Palestinians they've killed in the last couple of months at, whatever, Munich.
Whenever it comes to the genocide question, because that's one that is very hot right now, specifically for the American audience. This is a key point of the intra-left debate around Joe Biden and his candidacy. So, Batya, I would like for you to respond and to make the case around why Israel is or is not committing a genocide. We'll stick on this question and we'll get some responses from over here as well. So, Batya, go ahead.
I don't believe Israel's committing a genocide, precisely because of how Cenk defined the word genocide, which is the intentional targeting of a people based on their ethnicity or their race. And that's clearly not happening here. I mean, first of aren't you curious what I'm going to say?
You're up soon, but Jade is next.
They're not being targeted because they're Muslims or Arabs or Palestinians. They're being targeted because Hamas has embedded itself within a civilian population, right? None of us would accept, I hope, that if they had only killed, let's say 6,000 Hamas terrorists, that would be a genocide, right? We would understand that was a military campaign to rid Israel of a danger threatening to its civilians. These people who have been killed as a result of Israel's attempt to eradicate Hamas. And so to suggest that they're being targeted because of their race, we don't believe that. We know that that's not the case. We know that
that's obviously a lie. We all know that's a lie. Like, we're done. We've moved past the human shields routine, right? Right. They embed themselves in the civilian population. They hide behind human shields. No, that they're literally making that up. It's the same line that they used to say they were only targeting Hamas at the same hospital that they mass murdered a bunch of women and children at.
If they were Palestinians living in Israel or living in Jordan, Israel would not be committing, they would not be dying as a result of Israel's actions. And furthermore, you can point to all of the ways in which Israel has tried to move the civilian population out of the way. They moved 1 million people out of northern Gaza into Khan Yunis and into Rafah, into southern Gaza to get them out of the way. Now I see you smiling. You're probably thinking to yourself, oh, she's proving my point. It's ethnic cleansing. But here's the point. I mean, it's either the ethnic cleansing charge and the genocide charge are a little bit contradictory, right?
They're really not, though. You can be carrying out genocide and ethnic cleansing. So I don't know why you're trying to make that happen. Second of all, she's like, they tried to move them. They moved them, and then they bombed them when they left.
Because if they were trying to commit a genocide and could just simply, eradicate the world of Gaza's Muslim population, surely they would not be moving civilians out of harm's way while they're trying to get rid of the presence of Hamas in a certain place or not.
Are you saying that it is more akin to an ethnic cleansing, or it's not a genocide?
I think it's really funny to both claim that Israel doesn't do enough to protect civilians and then to use a word like ethnic cleansing, like a nasty, accusatory, racist word, when they actually did try, like to suggest they're doing something, racist when they try to protect the civilian lives of the people living in northern Gaza.
Because you dominated last time, so Dave, you're up.
Okay, so look, I want to just say that in terms of the charge of genocide, I don't use the word genocide. I just think that the debate devolves into semantics every time you use it. The international legal definition of genocide is so incredibly vague that it's like if you try to destroy a nationality or ethnicity in whole or part. So then, like, if you were to murder 2 people of an ethnicity, I just don't even care about the debate. I'm saying it's wrong. And in terms of the term ethnic cleansing, there is no debate. Every single new historian in Israel concludes that there was ethnic cleansing at the beginning of the creation of Israel. Now, I know I'm just making that point. I just want to go back to revisit something here because I literally just made what I feel is the most important point of all of this about that. I think the entire Israeli defense is destroyed when you add in the component that they intentionally propped up Hamas so that the Palestinians wouldn't get their freedom. And as a response, Mr. Prager invokes an atrocity that happened once. And okay, that was an atrocity. Let me just finish. All right, let me just finish. Yes, I know you can invoke
the rest of the day or evening.
Yes, okay, can I just finish?
Non-Hamas Palestinian atrocities.
What happened in Tyre Yassin? You want to have
it was 1948.
So what? Okay,
there was no war in the history of the world.
So it's a cop-out.
No, it's not a cop-out.
So
Tyre Yassin was awful.
Okay, so let me just finish my sentence, and then you guys can continue. So it proves nothing. My point is it proves nothing because I'm mirroring how your point proves nothing. You're just dodging the point that I was making about this current war. Yes, it's objectively true. There have been horrific, ungodly atrocities committed by both sides.
Not both sides. That's a lie. That is a libel. It is not true.
It's a lie.
Other than Tyre Yassin, which was during wartime of a village, and absolutely terrible. Tell me where there's been Israeli atrocities comparable to Palestinian atrocities.
Everything I know,
everybody quiet. Name it. Or you libeled. Name it.
Wait, so why the one hold on. So the one I said doesn't count. Why? Because during wartime?
No, because it is an exception. To make a generalization, Israel commits atrocities and Palestinian commits atrocities. You can't name one other than in 1948 in a village during a war. That is a libel of Israel.
Listen,
this is amazing. This is amazing. Amazing. So the guy is being generous to him. He's like, yes, there's been atrocities on both sides. You know what they say to try to be collegial, both sides atrocities. And Dennis Prager loses his shit because he says that it's a libel because apparently Israel has never committed an atrocity. Never committed an atrocity. Look at how red he's getting too. This is so embarrassing.
I'm mirroring how your point proves nothing. You're just dodging the point that I was making about this current war. Yes, it's objectively true. There have been horrific, ungodly atrocities committed by both sides.
Not both sides. That's a lie. That is a libel. It is not true.
It's a libel. Okay.
Other than Tyre Yassin, which was during wartime of a village and absolutely terrible. Tell me where there's been Israeli atrocities comparable to Palestinian atrocities. Go ahead. Everybody quiet. Name it. Or you libel. Name it. Or you libel.
So the one I said doesn't count. Why? Because it was during wartime?
No, because it is an exception. To make a generalization, Israel commits atrocities and Palestinian commits atrocities. You can't name one other than in 1948 in a village during a war. That is a libel of Israel.
Listen, you can keep saying the word libel.
Yes, it is a libel to morally equate atrocities on both sides. That is a libel. Libel means, Israel is as guilty of atrocity.
It's libel to equate atrocities. You got that? What he's literally saying is, it's not an atrocity if Israel does it. So it doesn't matter the horrific shit that Israel has done to the Palestinians, not just in the fucking 1940s, today, now. That doesn't matter because by definition, it's not an atrocity if Israel does it. And if you say it is, that's libel.
As the Palestinians is a libel of Israel. I don't know why that's complex.
Hold on, I was asked the question here.
It's not complex, it's psychotic.
Don't count, then fine. But if you want to ask for the atrocity, it's happening right now in Gaza. So I don't know what point you're trying to prove.
These are atrocities.
Yes.
Oh, I see. So this is the same as blowing up school buses of children.
I didn't say the same. No, I didn't.
You're using the same term.
You said that. I didn't say that. Okay, John, I'll be very quick. My point was that you mentioning an atrocity.
Actually, yeah. Because they've targeted children. They're literally starving children to death. They've shot children. They've executed children. They've bombed children. So, yeah, apparently Dennis Prager hasn't seen any of the things that we've been seeing on Twitter.
Atrocity that happened in the past did not counter the point that I just made, that this destroys Israel's defense for this war. And I just made the point that I could name atrocities too. You're now claiming that I'm equating things that I never said were the same and accusing me of libel, which is tired. So respectfully, it's tired.
They both commit atrocities is tired. Okay, that's
a fact. That's a fact.
Okay,
go ahead, Cenk.
Yeah, well, he lives on a different planet. Okay, so first the genocide thing, let me just finish that real quick. And then, okay. All right. Okay. All right. So first of all, just finish up the genocide real quick. Every genocide defender who says the same thing, and I don't mean it in a personal way, guys. I just mean that the Serbs literally at the International Criminal Court said, well, we didn't target them because they're Muslims. We targeted them because they were there and they were against us. The Turks said, we didn't target them them because they're Armenians. It's because they struck us first and they did this rebellion and they were killing Turkish civilians. What the hell were we supposed to do? We had to move them and we had to kill them. So we had a right to defend ourselves. You're mirroring exactly what every defender of a genocide says. Well, and what I say back to the Turks, my own people, is, yeah, you didn't kill Norwegians, you didn't kill people from Botswana, you killed Armenians and you targeted Armenians. And in the same exact way, Israel is targeting Palestinians. The fact that it's because they're there doesn't help that case at all. You're moving them, you're killing them, and you're targeting Palestinians. That is a genocide. Okay, so hold on. I haven't even, that's just a quick point on genocide. I didn't even get to the actual thing because he's making a point about
doesn't agree with the word genocide.
Okay, I don't care. Okay, so I don't care at all. Okay, so there's a lot we don't agree on. He's a libertarian, not progressive. So
we disagree on everything. This is so terrible. We agree on this.
Yeah. So now the core of the thing is, like, this is the reason I said genocide's on a different planet is. He says, name one Israeli atrocity. Everyone out there that isn't an Israeli supporter is screaming into the camera right now, right now. So for example, Hamas killed 34 kids on October 7th. I came out immediately, condemned it in the strongest words. I can't believe it. How is that helpful? It's immoral. It's counterproductive. It's dumb. It's terrible in every way. 34 poor Israeli kids. There are now 15,000 dead Palestinian kids. And you're telling me that Israel hasn't committed atrocities? So guys, what we are seeing with our own eyes is that Gaza is decimated. They destroyed the entire place, and 85% of and over 85% of Palestinians have been displaced. There's 1.1 million people starving to death, and you still can't see it. And that's what's amazing about bias, that you look at how they have killed over 33,000 people. Okay, say 6,000 as Hamas, say 9,000 as Hamas. You still have 25,000 dead women and children, and you go, what atrocities? They have kill zones. Why did they kill the 3 Israeli hostages? Because they were in a kill zone. In a kill zone, they murder everyone in the kill zone. There's sniper bullets in kids' heads because they were in a kill zone. They've killed more journalists than all other conflicts this year combined. They've killed 3 times the amount of humanitarian aid workers. The World Central Kitchen, they murdered those people. There was a 6-year-old who was stuck. They told the IDF, we are going to get her. The IDF said, okay. The IDF goes and finds her. They'd already killed her. The rest of her family members in that car. They then killed not only the 6-year-old girl, but everyone in the ambulance that came to rescue them. And you're saying you can't see a single Israeli atrocity? And one last thing.
It's a great point. All great points by Jank. That's what I was trying to say. Like, Dennis Prager is a fucking psychopath and he's delusional. And he's like, by definition, if Israel does it, it's not an atrocity. And Jank's right. He lives in an alternate universe because I have seen all those stories. The one about Hind Rajab, who was killed in a car while she was waiting for help from the Palestinian Red Crescent, and they killed them too. The aid workers, the World Central Kitchen workers, all the journalists that they've targeted. I mean, he's right. You can just look at everything that's happening in Gaza every single day, atrocity after atrocity after atrocity. And the kill zones, that they'll kill anybody that goes in, especially if they're male, but they'll kill women too and children. But he doesn't see it. By definition, if Israel's doing it, it's not an atrocity.
Ratio would you accept? What ratio would you accept?
And then she goes back to the what ratio would you accept? You see how we're talking about atrocities, purposeful carried out atrocities by the Israeli government. And her answer is, or her response is, well, what ratio would you accept? Again, because in her mind, there is no atrocity coming from the Israeli government. If they're doing it, by definition, it's moral.
Atrocity is keeping 5.5 million Palestinians prisoners. And Prager says, oh, not 75 years, only 57 years we've kept these people prisoners. And think about the absurd claims that you guys are making. Oh, the Palestinians are fine inside of Israel. I can make the same exact claim for black people during slavery. Well, they were fine in the North. We had a democracy in America. What are you guys complaining about slavery in the South? They were treated perfectly fine in the North.
We actually have to do a quick read from our sponsor. So Dave, if you don't mind.
Do we have to do a quick read?
Yeah, you're welcome.
Hey guys, you know what I love? Debates about Israel and Palestine.
The United States can be accused, or Britain.
Okay, so I'm being told in terms of we're going to move on to the Iran section in a little bit. But Dennis, I did promise that you were going to be able to respond on the genocide question. So I want to give you that chance before we move on to that section. Go ahead.
Well, I keep referring to 2 things, but repetition is the mother of pedagogy, as I learned in the course of my life.
Good luck. Come on.
Yes, thank you. Okay. Because I know how important it is. I don't learn the first time. The United States can be accused, or Britain could be accused of committing genocide in Germany. The United States could be accused of committing genocide in Japan by the exact same criteria as, quote unquote, Israel is committing genocide in.
Also, I just want to point out, too, that it's very telling that they only can compare what they're doing to war crimes during World War II. Like the Geneva Conventions came out of World War II because we said we weren't ever going to do that again. That there needed to be rules around war so that atrocities like what happened in World War II would not happen again. And yet they can only compare what they're doing to World War II because it's that horrific.
In Gaza. When did it stop? When did the American bombing of Japan or of Germany stop? When they surrendered. If Hamas surrendered tomorrow, gave up the hostages.
And again, we had conventions that came out of that because of the war crimes, but you guys are just going to pretend that didn't happen.
That are still alive. I'm sure they killed quite a number. But nevertheless, if they did that, if they surrendered and that would end the issue, it would end the issue the next day. Israel doesn't want to bomb Palestinians. The reason that there are so many Palestinian civilians being killed, whatever the number it is, and that is a tragedy, it is not an atrocity. There's a difference between tragedy and atrocity. Atrocity is deliberate, tragedy is not deliberate. Israel does not deliberately target civilians. Hamas deliberately puts civilians in the way of targeting them. That is the way in which they have created it. One other thing, you will probably know this because it was in Newsweek. A member of the United States military who teaches at West Point said that Israel has been the most moral army in urban warfare that he has ever. You laugh at him. That's correct. That's right. You're allowed to laugh at him. He did right. And so did the head, Kemp, Richard Kemp, the head of all British forces in Afghanistan, said that Israel, the IDF, is the most moral army he has ever encountered. Which, given that he is a member of the British Army and is a high-ranking, I think, a general, that is particularly a powerful phrase. That's the truth. They do everything they can not to kill civilians, and it would stop tomorrow if Hamas surrendered.
I know this is going to be infuriating for you guys, but we do have a clip that we want to play. This is going to be on Iran. Feel free, we can come back to this in a little bit, but I do think it is important. So this is a clip which has been curated for us by Zero Hedge. This is Benjamin Netanyahu on the topic of overthrowing Iran, something he's advocated for since the 1990s. And specifically, we want to focus in after the clip about why the U.S. should support Israel in its endeavors in its defense against Iran if it chooses to do so. Let's take a listen to the clip now, please, and let's see it.
Obviously, we'd like to see a regime change, at least I would, in Iran, just as I would like to see in Iraq. The question now is a practical question. What is the best place to proceed? It's not a question of whether Iraq's regime should be taken out, but when should it be taken out? It's not a question of whether you'd like to see a regime change in Iran, but how to achieve it. The application of power.
And so that clip, I wanted to turn to you guys. Dennis, actually,
year was that? Sorry,
2002. That was December 2002, prior to the U.S. invasion of Iraq.
Right,
Dennis, you just spoke, so Batya, I think we can go to you. This is specifically on the Iranian question. And I think about U.S. support. We are in America, after all, as to why should the United States, should it defend Israel in the Iranian retaliation for the Israeli bombing of what the Iranians claim was an embassy, of what the Israelis claim is a IRGC military outpost. So why don't you go ahead, and then I'll get a response from Dave.
I think the question is a little bit backwards. I don't think Iran would have retaliated from Iranian soil rather than from a proxy, as is its wont, had it not picked up on signals from the Biden administration that it was weakening in its resolve and its support of Israel. So that is the question here. Is I think the order is reversed.
Again, delusional. The idea that the Biden administration is weak. Biden is a psychotic Zionist that has given Israel everything it wants, has bent over backwards to do everything that Netanyahu wants, and yet these lunatics continue to call him weak.
Yeah, and I think that it is historic that Iran attacked Israel from Iranian soil. And so it is extremely significant that, according to, my analysis and many others, that was the direct result of Biden's wavering support, which can be attributed to, 100,000 voters in Dearborn, domestic politics, let's say, right?
Okay.
The youth vote, what have you, right? His need to signal, I'm not behind Israel in the way that you think, to the people who he thinks need to hear that in the United States. As for whether we should support Israel in its retaliation against Iran, I consider myself an America First person. I think probably we would agree when it comes to Ukraine and Russia. I do think this is significantly different because, the Iranians and the Houthis, they're not only chanting, death to Israel, they are chanting death to America. They do see us as linked from a values point of view with Israel. Most Americans agree with them. And so it seems to me to be sort of odd to say.
Yeah, they think we're linked because we pay for all their shit. We're their sugar daddy. We're their fucking ATM machines. So they're not wrong to think that.
Well, the Americans who think that are wrong, the Iranians who think that are wrong, we also get a lot of extremely material benefits from our allyship with Israel in terms of military intelligence, which has saved countless lives, both American and Israeli and European, in terms of our military industrial complex.
I don't want to hear that shit. Like, Israel is like the most entitled country. They're so disrespectful to Americans. First of all, Benjamin Netanyahu treats Biden like shit. He treated Obama like shit. Like, they treat us like shit. They act so fucking entitled. It's amazing. They don't have any respect for us. So spare me with that, trying to like crocodile tears about how, the Houthis said death to America.
Maybe you don't think we should be, have an industry that makes trillions of dollars in the United States GDP that's based in weapons, but we do. And Israel has made us a lot of money in that regard and actually sacrificed developing its own military industrial complex that would have competed with ours. So arguably, I actually think this is true. Israel loses more by getting American aid than it gains. Although I think America probably gets a lot out of that, but ultimately that is a question for voters to decide. I would not be at all, that is a question for voters to decide. I do think we are linked in the mind of Iran and in all of the minds of their proxies, and that's why we should be supporting Israel.
Dave, go ahead.
Oh, well, yeah, I completely agree that Israel is great for the military industrial complex. So, if that's your pitch for why we ought to support them. Look, I would highly encourage people to educate themselves about this if they haven't already. I'd encourage people to read a piece called A Clean Break, A New Strategy for Securing the Realm. I'm sure you're familiar with it, sir. It was written by Richard Pearl and David Wormser in 1996. And this was a letter from two people who both served in the George W. Bush administration, very influential neoconservatives. And they did not write this letter to Bill Clinton, who was the president at the time. They didn't write it to Bob Dole, who was the Republican nominee running for president at the time. This was written to Benjamin Netanyahu. And it was all about how regime change in Iraq will be in Israel's interest, because then you can break up this peace process that Yitzhak Rabin started down, and we won't have to do this anymore. You'll have security in the region. Benjamin Netanyahu coming in 2002, testifying before Congress as a regional expert, explaining how if you overthrow Saddam Hussein, there's going to be peace in the region. It will have this sweeping effect where it makes everything better. Aside from the fact that they all got it all wrong, and not just wrong, but like disastrously wrong, the biggest catastrophic disaster in modern American history level wrong. I just do not understand how you can square the circle of claiming to be America first and also claiming we must unconditionally support a country who is clearly trying to pressure us into anti-America first policies. Look, this is just a fact, okay? Every president of my lifetime, Trump might be an exception to this, I'm not sure, but everyone else wanted a two-state solution, including, believe it or not, George W. W. Bush. After 9/11, Colin Powell, who was the wisest member of the George W. Bush administration, I don't think anyone would argue against that. He still sold the war in Iraq, even though he didn't believe in it. So he'll have to talk to his maker about that. But he told George W. Bush right after 9/11, you got to do a two-state solution, and you got to do it now for two reasons. Number one, you got record high approval ratings. This is the time to get it done. But more importantly, because he knew this is what drives so much of the terrorism problem that we have. It's not that Iran sees us as the same as Israel. It's that they recognize that we've been propping them up. We're the ones who shoots down the resolutions at the UN. We're the ones who funds them and arms them. Okay. And what happened? George W. Bush couldn't get it done. It was Tom DeLay. John Mearsheimer's done great reporting on this. It was Tom DeLay in the House who told him, you'll be a one-term president if you even try to do this. Okay. Every American president has wanted a two-state solution. Again, maybe not Donald Trump, but the rest of them all did, and they couldn't get it done. All I'm saying is, if you're America first, how can you support the fact that we have a political system where our elected representatives get rebuked by a foreign country? That is not America first.
The reason he would have been a one-term president is because the American people would have rebelled, right? Not because being
Whatever. No, they wouldn't have. No, they wouldn't have. This is all political interest. It's like he said. That was a good point by that guy. Yeah, it is not America first to be saying, to be putting our interests behind the interests of a foreign government. That, what was she saying? We're supposed to be thankful to Israel because of the military-industrial complex? Because they're great customers of all of our weapons? Like, oh, well, they buy so many of our weapons, so we should support Israel because they buy so many of our weapons. They're great for business. And he's right. It's not America first to want and to allow Israel to drag us into World War III and drag us into a war with Iran, drag us into regime change with Iran. How is that America first? Drag us into another war with Iran? That they want us to fight for them? They want us to fund for them. Oh, and they hate us because we're connected to Israel. Yeah, because we fund them. And as this guy said, stop resolutions and shit.
Netanyahu would have come here and made sure that
no, I'm sorry, that. No, it's also because there's a giant, powerful lobby advocating on behalf of a foreign government who makes it their mission to ruin the lives of anybody who's critical of that foreign government. That's part of it too. By the way, the evangelical Christians, that's also a big part of it. So,
yes. I'll yield. And I'll speak. I'll yield and then speak.
Well, it's like the idea that some lobby is the reason that an idea has power in the United States is completely backwards. The lobby gets its power because it is representing where the majority of Americans are at. A lot of people think the NRA. You think that the NRA is the reason that people have guns in America? Really, you don't think that?
NRA are a bunch of sellouts.
No, but the idea, it's a very good parallel.
Americans have overwhelmingly supported Israel. If there was no AIPAC, they still would have supported Israel. Because
that was probably what she just said was probably not only the biggest lie, but the dumbest thing that has been said on this panel tonight. Lobbying only exists because the people are there pushing it. It's the will of the people. The American people would have rebelled. The American people don't give a shit. And the American people would have rebelled. They wouldn't have, actually. But also, she's like, but seriously, that was the dumbest shit I've ever heard. The only reason why the lobbies exist is because the people, are the ones that create the lobby, not the other way around. Are you fucking for real? No, she has to know that that's not true. She can't be that stupid. She has to know that that's a ridiculous. She can't be that stupid. She's got to know that that is a ridiculous statement to make, a ridiculous thing to say. We are the ones that make the lobbies powerful. No, bro. No, bro. Like, I'm sure I don't need to explain this to any of you guys who know anything about lobbying. That is not how lobbying works in this country. We have powerful dark money groups and dark money funded lobbying firms in this country and all over the world, and they will ruin people if they don't do what they want. It's not the American people rising up and going and lobbying their Congress like Mr. fucking whatever his name goes to Washington or some shit. No, these are dark money groups, corporations, corporate interests, hedge funds, powerful people that control these lobbies and that use them as pressure tools, and the politicians answer to the lobbyists, not the other way around.
Right.
Yeah, exactly. All right, fine. So
I don't think we need AIPAC either. Israel would be just fine without it because the American people have
The only reason why they do what AIPAC wants is because of AIPAC's money and their power, not because any fucking American wants AIPAC to do what they're doing. No, AIPAC takes the money from these dark money billionaires And then they give the money to our politicians and say, because I gave you that money, you better fucking vote the way I want you to. Often, more often than not, going against the will of the American people. So whatever, this is I can't get over that. What a fucking stupid statement.
It's bad.
Whether we need it or not is not the question. The question is, why do they exist, given the fact, which is fair, why do they exist? Because people lobby politicians on behalf of what many Americans support. Americans to this day and every poll still support Israel, as it happens. So the arguments that have been offered here...
No, it's actually the other way around. Again, these lobbying groups don't lobby politicians on behalf of what the American people want. That's not how it works today. What happens is lobbying groups lobby politicians on behalf of what they want. What they want. The small elite, the small slice of people who want it. Small interests. Small amount of dark money groups and billionaire special interests. They lobby on behalf of what they want. And the rich and the military industrial complex. Not the American people. Like, seriously, these guys are talking like it's fucking 1915.
It really is a different planet. Just for the record, this may come as a shock to the two of you, at least.
I'll say.
Listening. And I would put my hand on a Bible. I would take a lie detector test, because obviously there's no way I could prove this. When I remember sitting at the edge of my bed watching this, and I never watched TV. I watched Arafat and Rabin shake hands, and I had tears in my eyes. That is how badly I wanted peace. I supported a two-state solution nearly all of my life, certainly since the Six-Day War when I was a college kid. I have always supported it. I no longer support it, just like nearly every peace activist in Israel no longer supports it. And we don't support it thanks to Hamas and thanks to the PLO, because they have made it clear if Israel leaves the West Bank, they will get another genocidal, if you want to use the term, a genocidal terror group of Nazi-like Hamas people running it. Why have there not been elections? Why is the PLO not allowed elections for, 16 years? Because they were afraid.
So you admit you're occupying the West Bank. Good to know. Also, if you don't support a two-state solution now because of that, you never did.
Hamas will win.
I agree. I just want to, because I appreciate you saying that. And yeah, what a tragedy that peace deal didn't work out. And I totally take you at your word that. I was just wondering if either of you guys would respond to the point that I made before, that you just kind of brought up the Olympic atrocity after that. So if Hamas is so horrible, and I know you guys would both say, Iran finances Hamas, and so they're evil for that. What about the government of Israel doing it? Do we have anything to say about that?
Right. So when you are, yes, I'll tell you, I'll give you an answer. The United States supported the second greatest mass murderer in history after Mao, Stalin, in order to defeat Hitler. It is very common to support scum to defeat bigger scum.
Who's the bigger scum than Hamas?
The bigger scum was those who wanted to destroy Israel.
But isn't that Hamas?
You're right, so it's both.
You just have no argument. Who's the bigger scum? Who's worse than the Nazis?
Yeah, he just said earlier that Hamas were worse than the Nazis, but now he's saying it's okay that Israel propped up Hamas because we had bigger fish to fry. Which one is it?
You're right. No, other Nazis.
Okay.
You're right. They're equivalent. I don't understand. Why is that?
That's not an answer.
Batya needs to respond. She's been trying to respond, and we have to bring it back to the Iran question too.
I have two main responses to that. I think it's a really important point. I don't disagree that it was a disastrous, in hindsight, disastrous at the time. I thought it was disastrous because, as you say, it's not just. It wasn't that Netanyahu was giving Israeli taxpayer funds to Hamas, but he was facilitating the transfer of cash from Qatar. Okay, so let's just be very
sent the head of Mossad to Qatar to make sure the cash came back in, specifically for the reasons of keeping Hamas in power. So he didn't have to give
it's not that he is giving them the money, right? It's not coming from Israel. I just want to be clear. There are a couple of things I want to point out about that. The first is he didn't do that because he thought Hamas was capable of October 7th. He did that because he thought they had no power, that they had no real ability.
He thought he could control the height of the flame, were his words.
Hold on.
Yes, he thought that they were less of a threat to Israelis than the potential of a Palestinian state led by Abu Mazen. And as a result, he humiliated routinely Abu Mazen, who represented the non-violent camp. That it was a criminal at the time, and in hindsight, even more so. But to say that he was propping up the people who then would do...
So you just undermined your whole point. Throughout this whole thing, they keep talking about Hamas as if they are this powerful, equal to the Israeli army, terrorist organization. But then she says right there, admits it openly. The reason why Netanyahu was propping up Hamas and making sure that they got the money from Qatar is because he didn't think that they could do anything. He thought that they were powerless. Which one is it? Either Hamas are this scary terrorist threat that has to be eliminated. And they're so dangerous. They're like the Nazis. And they are powerful. It's an equal war. Or they were impotent and not a threat, so much not a threat that Netanyahu was okay with facilitating their continued power, them continuing to stay in power and run the Gaza Strip and facilitating funds to them because he didn't think they were a threat. Which one is it?
October 7th. I don't think that is fair, not because I don't,
say that. Yeah.
because he was doing it out of a complete misunderstanding about what they were capable of. And the second point that I would make about that is you left out something very important in your narrative of how things went from like the beautiful Israel that like was coalescing around Rabin to the like horrible Israel in which Bibi Netanyahu was able to cobble together very with much difficulty, by the way, the ruling coalition that he has now that I'm sure we would all agree is not the one we would like to see in power. Not that we're stakeholder voters there, but you left out the second intifada, which is extremely important. 1,000 Israelis, 700 of them civilians murdered, going to school on the bus, children murdered, blown to pieces. That was the equivalent of 50,000 Americans dying over the course of 4 years. That changes a nation. That is
Stop comparing everything that happens in Israel to what would the equivalent be in America.
the reason that the Likud vision was able to get to a place where not a ruling majority, but was able to
Why do you think that
Alright,
Intifada happened during the Oslo Accords?
we're
And
getting
wasn't
past-
until Yitzhak Rabin
we're
was
getting past a
assassinated
little
by a
bit of the-
right-wing Israeli.
I just think that this disrupts your clean narrative of Bibi Netanyahu being the person who propelled, who enabled October 7th to happen
I
as some
think
sort of.
my points have been made, so Cenk, why don't you go ahead?
Yeah, I haven't spoken since we started the Iran part, so I have about 12 things to respond to. So I like that Dennis acknowledged that Netanyahu and Israel did prop up Hamas. So there you go. Now we know. Yeah.
But she gave the answer. He did not know what monsters he was supporting.
Oh, he didn't know who Hamas was. Come on. Okay, and it's because he wants a permanent occupation. And I'm glad that Dennis just acknowledged he also wants a permanent occupation.
No, I don't. I'm not for two states now. I
So
pray
what's
for
his
two
answer
states
then?
eventually.
Eventually,
Yes,
So,
but not
5
now.
75 more years,
It will be-
100 more years.
No.
How long should they be your servants?
As soon as Hamas,
Your prisoners. How long would you like to keep
they're
them
not prisoners. As soon as Hamas,
They're literally
as soon as Hamas gives up,
No, because
surrenders.
that's his position. He just said he doesn't want.
When were we prepared to make peace with Germany? When the Nazis came out of power. If the Nazi-like Palestinians are out of power, I would have peace the next
Oh,
day.
yeah. Okay, that's all right. So he says, okay, an indefinite occupation where we will keep the Palestinians under our thumb and our boot, and until they know their role, then maybe we'll consider freeing them. But until then, they will have to serve us. Okay, very Christian of you or whatever it is that people say these days. Okay, so speaking of Christians, there's a giant Christian Zionist movement here, and they are also part of the reason why the polling turned out okay for Israel throughout a lot of our history. But by the way, they are now greatly dwindled, and that is why the polling for Israel in America is not as good anymore. And by the way, the fact that Israel has made Netanyahu has made a deal with the devil with those Christian Zionists is abhorrent, because if you push them on what they plan to do, they said, "Oh yeah, we love Israel," because then Jesus is going to come back after
They never
Israel.
say that. I know
They
that.
definitely say it. They've said it
say that.
1,000 times,
Okay,
and then he's going to
I'm
murder
not-
all the
I'm a
Jews.
Jew.
Congratulations on doing a
He doesn't know
devil
what he's
deal with the
talking
devil. Okay, so okay, all right, guys, come on now.
All right, fine.
Okay, so and AIPAC, and look, Batya, you just said that Israel's helping us because they helped the military-industrial complex, and they have lobbyists just like everybody else. These lovely lobbyists. Okay, I don't think you realize how unpopular those comments are. So yes, AIPAC is definitely lobbyists, along with the Christian Zionists. They definitely influence politicians. The reason Tom DeLay said you'll be a one-term congressman is because he said the Christian Zionists will turn on you, and the evangelical base will turn on you. And AIPAC will turn on you. AIPAC's about to spend. No, they're both. Okay, so hold, guys.
Go, continue.
Okay,
Continue.
so if you guys are saying that the $100 million that AIPAC is promising to spend in the next election is not relevant to the politicians, that these politicians are angels, they would never consider millions of dollars given to them in bribes, campaign contributions, and that actually determines almost 95% of elections, not the AIPAC money, but lobbyist money overall, that they don't take that into account because Joe Biden's an angel. He took $11.2 million from AIPAC, but that didn't affect him at all. He's the #1 donor that got money from AIPAC in United States Senate history. Who's the #1 donor for Speaker Johnson? AIPAC. But you guys say no, Ted Cruz, AIPAC. No, those beautiful angels would never be affected by the bribes and campaign contributions that AIPAC is giving them. And by the way, it is not just AIPAC. Guys, Raytheon, Lockheed Martin, Boeing, they love this war. Are you kidding me? A giant war in the Middle East, they're going to make so much money. You're talking about the oil companies are going to make billions, maybe trillions from this. All of those different lobbyists are bribing both the Republicans and the Democrats. So there is massive money that is going into this potential war. Now, this war, we've seen this movie before. It was the Iraq war. And yes, morons and warmongers like Netanyahu said, oh, we're going to be great as liberators. How'd that turn out for us? Iran is 4 times the size of Iraq. I'm not going into Iran. I will do a massive rebellion inside America, and I bet I get a ton of right-wingers and a ton of left-wingers, and there's not a single American troop that's going to go into the Middle East to die for Netanyahu. Not one. If you try to send one of our guys into the Middle East, we're going to stop paying taxes. We're going to be a massive tax rebellion.
You know what?
I'm not going to give
them. Just stop right now, man. We're trying to wait for this war.
Dennis, I think with the return to the Iran question, you can respond to them
Great
as well, but make a case for why
response.
the U.S. military should defend Israel against Iran as
I
well.
did not.
In some of your
You didn't
comments.
say the U.S. military. You said
okay,
whether
okay,
America should support. I did not suggest.
Fair enough.
Israel
Okay, I said U.S. support
has
Iran.
made it clear all of its existence. It doesn't want one American soldier to die in Israel or to fight in Israel. Okay, just want to make that
just the
clear.
money and the jets.
That's right. That is correct.
No.
Just the money and the jets. That is right. So if you feel that supporting Israel is immoral, fine. That's the clarity that I aim for.
Oh, it's definitely immoral.
Yes, definitely
They're
immoral.
imprisoning 5 million
That's right. That's
Palestinians.
right. I see. Okay.
They're oppressive.
Okay, go ahead.
They're not imprisoned. They are occupied. They're not imprisoned. Okay.
You cut the water for electricity. What is that?
The rape of the
You
word.
couldn't even do that to prisoners in
You
America.
let me talk.
No,
Yeah.
Yes, I did. The left has mangled language. I say raped, and then people get angry. Well, aren't you raping the word rape? No, we look up rape in the dictionary. There are 2 definitions. Like the rape of the rainforest is not a sexual act. They have raped the word genocide. They have raped the word racism. They have raped all of these words that actually once meant something. And that's what is being done now. This is not the genocide that Israel is engaged in. The number of Palestinians has increased by 5-fold since Israel was created. If that's a genocide, we should all suffer from such a genocide and have such growth of our populations. As regards Iran, so this is a legitimate question. Is it in the United States' interest, purely as Americans, that Iran thrive or that there be a regime change? Let's say we can't do a regime. I understand that. I'm asking in theory. What would be more pro-American? A pro-American Iran, which is a very powerful country and a particularly intelligent people, and what would be better? Having these vile theocrats from the Middle Ages who kill women and arrest women who aren't properly dressed in public. This is what you guys want us to say it doesn't matter? We left Afghanistan, which I assume you guys were supporting, like we should leave Afghanistan. I did not support leaving Afghanistan because I knew the hellhole that the Taliban would create. And I don't know why America first means it's okay if people who want to destroy us take over a country. I don't understand why that's America first. And I have one other comment on America first. I wrote a column on this and I stand by this. This is really important morally. I am America first. My life is a perfect example of a lifetime given to defending America and American values. But I am never and will never be America only. There are higher values than just your country. My country is first, but it is not the only moral question in my life.
Okay, thank you, Dennis. Dave, go ahead.
I love how these people
okay, well, I mean,
always talk about morals as if they're so moral. Like, oh, I get to answer the moral question. I know because I'm moral. It's like, no, actually, you're not. What you're defending is atrocious, and you want us to do regime change in Iran.
Look, if I think it's kind of look, if you're just saying, hey, wouldn't it be great if like the repressive Iranian regime was gone and then like a regime that came and gave liberty to their people?
Yeah, exactly. Wouldn't it be great? We're not, first of all, if you're America first, then you shouldn't want to be the world policeman. Second of all, we should have never been in Afghanistan in the fucking first place. Not for as long as we were. And what happened as soon as we left? The Taliban took back over, which was always going to happen.
Yeah, sure, that'd be great. That I don't think is necessarily a relevant question. I also don't know who would disagree with you on that. I'm sure there are some people. I'm certainly not one of them. The fact is that
Hamas would disagree with me.
Right, I'm not one of them.
You're sort of defending, but you're not one of them.
I'm not even kind of defending Hamas, but
Yes.
I'm actually the only one. I'm criticizing Israel for propping them up. But anyway, so yes, that would be great. The point is that people who supported the war in Iraq, like Benjamin Netanyahu.
I love that. He literally is like, oh, well, you're defending Hamas, so are you Hamas? Everyone's Hamas.
Like, I'm sure you did, sir.
No, I didn't.
You didn't. Okay, so I apologize for that. That's fair. I shouldn't have said that.
No, that's fair. No, you don't have to apologize. It's very understandable that you would assume that I did. But there was proof. I was on hardball with Chris Matthews, and he was shocked when I told him that I am not supporting us going into Iraq.
Okay, so I give you a lot of credit for that.
So it's recorded.
Did he sexually harass you?
Just say, no, he did not. I felt bad about it. But I will say, though, that once we were there, I did believe that we had to prevail.
Okay, fine, fair enough. So let me say, I'll amend that to say, all of the neoconservatives, Benjamin Netanyahu, the people who supported us going into the war in Iraq, well, what was the effect of that? We handed the country essentially over to Iran. And all of this wisdom, which was so ridiculous, that so you had Saddam Hussein, a longtime enemy of Iran. They fought a brutal war together where 500,000 people on each side died. By the way, America backed Saddam Hussein while he was doing the most vicious things that he had ever done. He was a Sunni minority oppressing a Shiite majority. And their scheme was, if we overthrow this guy, this will put pressure on Iran to be more democratic. And all that happened was it gave more regional influence to Iran. And then actually the attempted regime change in Syria that Obama failed on for multiple reasons. I think actually kind of similarly to what you guys were talking about. He was sending these weapons into the anti-Assad rebels. They saw, as John Kerry admitted, the rise of ISIS. Obama called them JV. I think it's very similar to the way Benjamin Netanyahu looked at Hamas. I can control the height of the flame. And then they invaded Iraq. And he's like, hey, you guys weren't supposed to do that part, right? But what happened, what was the effect of that? Was that the Syrians were more reliant on Iran than ever before. What was the effect on the Saudi-US war in Yemen? That the Houthis became more reliant on Iran than ever before. So yes, we would all like this magical scenario where Iran becomes a free country, but in reality, the policies that Israel, as well as most of the neoconservatives in this country have pushed, have been to the opposite effect, has only made Iran more powerful and more influential in the region.
Go ahead, Batya.
Exactly.
I don't really disagree with
Okay,
that.
all right, well, Jane,
There
you
you
want to
go.
say something?
Now I'm gonna read your
We'll
book.
We're going to wrap this segment.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
So a bunch of things here. So are the mullahs in charge of Iran biotheocrats? Yes, they are. And so I was born Muslim. I'm proud to be Muslim culturally, but I'm an atheist now. So they would consider me an apostate. And trust me that I'd be the first one on the chopping block. So I got no interest in the mullahs. I got no interest in the Grand Ayatollah. I don't want to help them, support them in one way. And they've destroyed what was a beautiful, awesome culture in Persia. Okay, so now, having said that, is the answer always war? No. North Korea is a terrible, despotic, tyrannical government. It doesn't mean that we should invade North Korea. Tons of South Koreans would die, Japanese would die, would get embroiled in a horrible war. And with neocons, I always feel like their slogan is, I forgot the question, but the answer is war. Okay? And so we had to deal with Iran under Obama where we stopped their enrichment of uranium and we took all the uranium out of the country. That was a terrific deal. And I criticized Obama a lot, but that was one of the things that I gave him a lot of credit for. It was one of the best things he did. It was maniacal to get out of that deal. Now they're enriching uranium. How did that help? And the only reason why it helps is because the neocons want them enriching uranium, so they have an excuse to start that war. And then Yahoo and Dick Cheney and the others have been very clear. With John Bolton, Lindsey Graham, all neocons, all very clear. They have wanted this war with Iran for decades now. And they want us to fight it. They want American boys to fight it. They want American taxpayers to fight.
That's the reason why they didn't like the Iran deal. That's the reason why. They were mad that they created a diplomatic solution because it got in the way of their desire for regime change in Iran.
Finance it, and that is not the right answer. And so, and when you turn back to Israel, what is the one thing that Israel has done that has been a spectacular success in terms of all these conflicts?
Also, too, like the gaslighting they always do of saying that if you don't want to go to war with Iran, that means that you love the mullahs.
A peace deal with Egypt. Peace actually works. Since that, not a single bomb has gone between Egypt and Israel, and Egypt has complied with the peace treaty. So the idea that peace never won't work because those those Palestinians or those Hamas guys, they're just going to do it forever and ever. That's exactly what they said about the Egyptians, and it wasn't true. Peace leads to peace. War leads to more war.
That's not a good point.
Go ahead.
I wish it were a good point. I do. I really wish. It's wishful thinking. The Israelis gave a piece of land, I think it's larger than Israel, back to Egypt, filled with oil, a great buffer in case of a war, and they gave every inch back to Egypt because they trusted Egypt. That's why, and they especially the president at the time. So that's the proof of the point. Israel is not aching to keep Arab land; it is aching for peace. Egypt is the point that makes my point If they trusted that the Palestinians would act like the Egyptians, there would have been peace a long time ago.
Well, I think
I know that back then historically, the Israelis did not think, oh, the Egyptians are right. Well, we can trust them.
They did under what was his name? The great Egyptian leader. No,
Saddam.
Saddam.
He was not a great leader until he got to the peace treaty.
Because he came to speak in the parliament. That's what changed their minds.
Well, look,
An Egyptian leader comes to the Jewish parliament.
Listen, the fact is that, and as a libertarian, I don't love this, but the fact is also that the U.S. bribed both Egypt and Israel with $3 billion a year forever. But no, look, the reality is that, Cenk, you have to at least admit there's a point here. Egypt and Israel went to war 4 times in 25 years or something like that, and they made a peace deal, and they gave it up. Now, all I'm saying is that there's a lot of people today, and it's totally understandable, that people today would go, look, things have gotten so bad between the Israelis and the Palestinians that they're just never going to be able to live in peace. But at the same
No
time,
one says never.
Okay,
They can't
let me
now.
just finish my point. At the same time, France and Germany are right next to each other, man. England and Ireland are right next to each other. And that should at least be maybe something all of us could agree on, that it's not that great. And by the way, you could go from being like horrific atrocities to a very short period after that, being relatively peaceful with each other. And I do think.
Yeah, exactly. And the implication again being that the Palestinians are somehow like just naturally violent. Like you can't make peace with them. You can make peace with Egypt, but you can't make peace with the Palestinians. It's just a fundamentally racist worldview.
I think Jank at least has somewhat of a point that they did make this land concession for peace deal and it stuck. And that could be, and you're not going to tell me there's not a radical Islam problem in Egypt.
They tried to make a land for peace deal with the Gazans. They completely withdrew, and they got Hamas as a bonus.
Can I ask you, why
they did not?
They put the peace process in first.
That's not true. First of all, the United States gives a ton of aid to both Israel and Egypt. They're the top 2 that we give aid to. But also, I love how he's like, we did withdraw. And then they had Hamas come in. They withdrew. And then Hamas was democratically elected. And then Israel and the United States were mad that they were democratically elected, even though they said to do a democratic election. So they put the blockade on them. So that's not leaving. When you put the blockade on them and started occupying them again and controlling every single thing in the strip, that's not leaving.
Formaldehyde.
This is actually worth digging
Also,
into.
the France-Germany analogy, etc., doesn't work, and I'll tell you why. Because Jew hatred, and that is what is fundamental to Iran and fundamental to Hamas, not fundamental to all Arabs, but it is fundamental to those ideologies, is exterminationist. No Frenchman wanted to.
No, it's not. That's not the reason why the Palestinians are fighting with the Israelis. It is not because they hate Jewish people. It is because they want them to stop occupying them.
Exterminate Germany. No German wanted to exterminate France. That is, by the way, that is very important that people understand this. Jew hatred is different from all other hatreds, and the world is filled with hatreds because it's exterminationist. The Passover is coming up, and there is in the Passover service is a 2,000-year-old line. It's in Hebrew, but I'll say it in English. In every generation, somebody arises to annihilate us, not to oppress us, not to enslave us, to annihilate us. This is unfortunately ancient and recurring.
Why? Just because people are so possessed by evil Jew hatred?
It does seem that way. It does seem that way.
We'll get Jank in here because I think it's a legitimate question around the formation from back in 2005, the rise of Hamas, because it's a contentious issue and it's leads to this. So go ahead.
Yeah. So look, the fact that Jewish people across the world have basically PTSD from the Holocaust and the pogroms and all of the discrimination and all the massacres that have been visited upon them is super understandable, very, very understandable. But that is part of what is blinding you to the fact that you are no longer David, you are Goliath. And so when you talk about the Germans and the French didn't want to exterminate each other, wait a minute, Germany and Poland are right next to each other, and the Germans wanted to exterminate the Polish, and that they were part of the people that suffered extermination under the Holocaust. And there are so many examples of people living side by side who hate each other because they're the 2 tribes next to each other and they've been warring forever. So again, another example is Greece and Turkey and Cyprus. And if Turkey had decided to keep all of Cyprus when they invaded Cyprus, they would have had to occupy the Greeks for all of these decades. And what would have happened? The Greeks would have done terrorism, right? And we would have had Greeks and Turks killed back and forth, back and forth. Instead, Turkey took about the percentage that they had in the population and let the Greek side go and never occupy them. Occupation is a cancer that always leads to more violence, more terrorism, more conflict, more war. You have to end the occupation. And Dennis, one more thing. Look, you think that you got this thing in your head that, oh, the whole world hates Jews. And I understand where it comes from. And so
why do you say that?
No, you're talking about the history.
No, I said Jew hatred is unique. It's exterminationist. I don't believe the whole world hates Jews. I didn't even imply it.
Okay, so it is I understand that, but look, that's actually ahistorical. It is not true. In the Middle East, Jews and Muslims lived together in peace for hundreds of years, sometimes thousands of years. The Turks rescued the Jews from the Spanish Inquisition. So there's an enormous history of Muslims and Jews working together until Israel. When in reality, in Europe, the Christians slaughtered the Jews over and over and over again. If you're saying that anyone had an exterminationist ideology against the Jews, it was the Christians in Europe. It's not the Christians today. It's a totally different situation. But what you've done is you think that the Palestinians are the Nazis. When the Palestinians are David, they're a group that has been brutalized for these 75 years, more land taken, more humiliation. Their power, water, electricity, their energy is controlled by.
Yeah, and that's what they mean when they say the devil's bargain, because Christians, European Christians oppressed and terrorized and murdered Jewish people for decades and decades and decades. But you don't hear Dennis Prager talking about that. They've made like a devil's bargain with the evangelical Christian Zionists, so they don't criticize that.
by Israel. Israel comes in, strips their men naked, parades them around, humiliates them in every way, and now has murdered 25,000 women and children. And you still see this poor little Israel, and it's the bad Muslims that are going to exterminate them. Whereas you're actually denying them a state. You're actually denying them freedom.
All right, go ahead.
Yes.
They're denying Hamas a state. Forget about it. They're denying Hamas a state. They're denying the PLO a state. They're not denying the Palestinians. When it was impossible to negotiate and make a state, they were for a Palestinian state. You keep going back to 75 years, which is the giveaway. That's what they believe. We've been occupied for 75 years.
Right, which I like how he's like doing the Netanyahu thing. Oh, I would give him a state, but we have no partner for peace. You know, there's always that convenient excuse.
And as regards Israel being David or Goliath, vis-a-vis a handful of Palestinians, they are militarily, they are Goliath. That is, and thank God they are. Right. But they are small. Israel is as tiny as New Jersey. The Arab world goes from the Atlantic Ocean to the Persian Gulf. There are 52 Muslim countries. I wouldn't exactly say David is Goliath.
Okay, all right, well, I'm sorry. We got 25 minutes left.
That's also psychotic because he keeps saying the Arab countries, the Arab countries. So what he's saying is all the Arab countries are an enemy to Israel. If he's saying that they're David and that what makes them David is all the Arab countries, he's just saying that Israel is a victim of all these Arab countries, that they're the enemy. They're the enemies of Israel, when that's not the case at all. And that's not how it's operating there.
To bring it back to a U.S. topic, free speech topic, I think would be helpful for the audience. The U.S. Congress, actually, the House of Representatives, just yesterday passed a resolution condemning the Palestinian chant, quote, "From the river to the sea, Palestine will be free," affirmed now by our Congress as anti-Semitic. So my question to the panel, and Batya, I'd like to start with you because I know you've spoken on this topic, is do you believe that chant, "From the river to the sea, Palestine will be free," is anti-Semitic?
It's so funny because I said to Dennis, I hope we can get through the whole debate without the word anti-Semitism, because I think it's a real turnoff to people. I think it's irrelevant, really. Like, we're talking about anti-Zionism. It's, you know, we should talk about that. We're talking about Israel.
Is that anti-Semitic?
You know, we're talking about Israel, and but so it's a line from Hamas's charter. Okay, so you know, I have very dear friends who are Palestinian, who are very far left, who would say, like, I don't mean it in an exterminationist way. I mean that whole land should be a democracy where everybody has civil rights, like in America, and it's a totally secular state. That's what it means to be free. They mean Palestinians will be free just like Jews. That's how I mean it when I say that's what they tell me, and I believe them because they're my friends and I love them. But it is a line from Hamas's charter, and so I think it, you know, the burden of proof is on the people chanting it to prove that they don't mean it in an eliminationist way that would wreak havoc and violence on Jews. Like I said, because it's part of the charter. And you know, if somebody was started to walk around chanting, you know, a line from another extremely vile terrorist group, the burden of proof would be on them that they don't mean it in that way. You know, on whether it's anti-Semitic, honestly, I'm so not interested in that question. I think there's a lot of very good-hearted people on the right who have been so traumatized by the accusations of racism coming from the left. They're just so sick of that. And so I'll just stay with that. Like, I don't know. I really, honestly, I hate when Congress passes resolutions that have to do with speech. It makes me very uncomfortable. But at the same time, I think, you know, Jews don't like hearing this because it makes them think of Hamas. So there's a tension there. I don't like government getting involved. And I honestly, I'm very offended by the idea that Jews need to be protected from chanting. Like, I feel like we're descended from the Maccabees and we need to man up, and it's not dangerous and it's not scary, but it is kind of gross. That's where I am.
Dave, go ahead.
Well, I appreciate that last thing you said. Look, I mean, the United States of America's federal government should absolutely never even get involved in what they feel about a chant. That is an outrage in a professed free society. I do not care what anybody in Congress feels about a chant. Whether you think it's anti-Semitic or not, you can yell anything anti-Semitic, anything anti-black, anything anti-woman, anything anti-Muslim, because this is the United States of America, and we have a right to say what we want to say. The First Amendment is very clear. Federal government, get out of anything having to do with speech. So that now, I kind of more or less agree with you. I've talked to different people. There are certainly some people who swear up and down they don't mean anything against the Jews. They just mean that, like, hey, they wish the Palestinians who were refugees could return to where they came from. I think there's definitely other people who mean something against the Jews when they say that. I think that's kind of the nature of this conflict and this protest. But so, go ahead.
Well, okay. By the way, I agree with you on the free speech issue. I'm virtually an absolutist, and I'm very afraid of the American future because 45% of young Americans say that they believe in free speech except for hate speech, which means that they don't believe in free speech.
Yeah.
So the left has done a real great job in undermining the Constitution on the most important principle, probably the First Amendment. That's okay. So a rare moment of agreement here.
First of all, he's not a free speech absolutist. Whenever right-wingers say they're free speech absolutists, they're always lying. And it always is free speech absolutist until it comes to things that they don't like or things having to do with Israel. And then they want your speech to be restricted, which is why they're all supporting the crackdowns on the college campuses right now. They're happy and cheering college kids getting arrested for protesting for Palestinian liberation on college campuses. They're wanting the National Guard to be called in. Free speech absolutists? I don't think so.
Here on that.
Well, that won't be that rare.
Okay, maybe. All right. But on the phrase "from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free," even in its most innocuous, yes, we'll just have a secular state and we'll all get along, hunky-dory and kumbaya. I'm sorry, but I do believe that with 22 Arab states, the need for a 23rd is not particularly essential. I think one Jewish state on the face of the earth, the size of New Jersey, smaller than El Salvador, is a perfectly okay idea. There is a Hindu state called India. There are non-Hindus in it, but it is a Hindu state, and Hindus make the majority. I'm happy that there is a Hindu state. There aren't two Hindu states, and Nepal may theoretically be considered one, but there's really one. Yeah, that's right. It's right up your alley. So you know, and that's why I'm.
Didn't want to interject too much.
No, but I know a lot about India because, as I told you earlier, I love visiting there. I've been there quite a number of times. Yes, at its least violent, from the river to the sea means no more Jewish state. And if one is intellectually honest, one acknowledges that.
Okay,
I think I agree with that.
Cenk,
Oh, good. That's
So
important.
I call that chant a dumb chant and not a good idea. And I took a lot of heat from people on my side. And so I said, look, if some people think that it's a genocidal chant, why do it? It's counterproductive. It doesn't make sense. Now, having said that, Netanyahu said the same exact thing. So Congress is a joke. Are they condemning Netanyahu? Because he said, from the river to the sea.
The Likud Party's founding charter has almost the same thing. It's like everything west of the Jordan River,
Yeah,
something like
and how
that.
about
It's
everybody who says Judea and Samaria? That is the same thing. That Israel gets to control from the river to the sea. So that is genocidal. That is exterminationist. So let's be honest. Let's be principled. Let's apply.
Exactly what he said. They say it in their founding charter too, from Judea to Samaria, but nobody says anything about that. And the fact that Congress actually did that, what a fucking joke. What a bunch of clowns.
Things equally. Of course, our Congress never does that. Yes, because of the donors and the lobbyists, and everyone out there knows that. And so when you talk about a state, and so this is the part why I don't understand two things that Dennis is saying. So number one, on the 22 Arab states, so what? That's not the issue. Why are you going to drive them into that? That's ethnic cleansing. If again, they're going back to the Turkish analogy, if the Turks said, what, there's all these Christian countries. I don't want the Armenians. Why don't you guys take them? We'll just drive them into Russia. We'll drive them into Georgia. We'll drive them into Europe. You guys take them. There's like 30, 40 Christian states there. What do we want with them? And then when you look, I don't want a one-state solution in either direction. And again, that will antagonize some people on my side. Because if we have a one-state solution where everybody actually gets to vote and it's not an apartheid state, the Palestinians will outvote the Jews in Israel, right? And then the Jewish state doesn't exist anymore. Israel shouldn't agree to that. Israel's never going to agree to that. And I agree with that. But so that one-state solution is definitely wrong. But Dennis, I don't know what you think is not now, but not permanent. I don't know if it's 2 years, 20 years, whatever it is. But that indefinite occupation is one state. But 5.5 million people are living under apartheid government. Well, you could use any word you like, apartheid, occupation, imprisonment, but they have no rights. And so that one-state solution is a disaster.
See, that's again, God, here we were. I was celebrating how much we agreed on, and now you blew it. Yeah. They have rights. They don't have complete rights. That is true. There is such a thing. You want to know where there's no right? There's no rights in North Korea. You used the North Korea example. There are no rights in Iran, basically. There are plenty of rights. They don't have the right to a foreign policy. They don't have a right to have an army. They don't have a right to have a police force.
That in Gaza, there's more freedom than in Iran?
Do I think that in Gaza there's more freedom than in Iran? Yeah. No, I don't think so.
Okay.
Oh, you mean? Oh no, I was thinking of Hamas. You're thinking of Israel. I think Hamas represses the freedom, not the Israelis.
So in the West Bank, you think they're substantially freer than in Iran?
Yes, that's correct. That's what I believe.
Yeah. Look at what they just did to them. The minute there was a conflict, they said we cut off your water, electricity, power.
The minute there was a conflict,
your
okay.
food.
All right, okay. Look, and you keep saying, is it 2 years? Is it 10 years? I keep telling you that what would have somebody have said to an American? What are you going to do? You're going to occupy Germany forever? No. As soon as the Nazis give up, we will. And there were occupied zones, by the way. There's French, Soviet, and the United States and British. There were 4 occupied zones in Germany, and it became one of the freest countries on the face of the earth. And Germany was for Germany. Okay, because they had no choice. Israel, we already established that Israel gave up an immense amount of land to Egypt because they understood.
Are you advocating the type of bombing campaign that we committed on Germany, on Gaza?
No, I'm not advocating. But no. Be better. Well, that's not a response to what I was talking about. We're talking about occupation. But fair enough. So my answer to you is I don't know. And by the way, neither do you. What would you want is what I never hear the people who are anti-Israel to answer the question. What would you want Israel to have done on October 8th? Yes, I do want to hear an answer.
I want to answer.
Yeah.
So the most important thing to understand is kind of what we were talking about before, right? Is like what, and I'm answering your question here, but just saying, keeping in mind what was going on before October 7th, which was for years, as we've all conceded here, that the Israeli government was propping up Hamas and also had this very arrogant attitude, like we can control the height of the flame, like Obama talking about ISIS, they're JV.
You're not answering my question.
I literally said,
no.
See, this is now you're just trying to bully me. I literally said, let me just give you a little bit of background because I'm leading into what the answer is. So again, my point is, well, first of all, no more doing that. No more propping up Hamas and underestimating them. Listen, the idea October 7th was not even like 9/11. It wasn't even like, oh, there was planes used as missiles into a building. We never could have seen this coming. They can say that intelligence report was on Bush's desk, but he got thousands of intelligence reports. It's not like it said the World Trade Center. What happened on October 7th was the thing that Israelis should have been concerned about the whole time. So number one, all it takes was not relying on the robot machine guns and having a military presence at the border. So immediately secure your borders. Number two, a real investigation into what happened on October 7th. What were the failures here? How did it take so long for the response time? Not this Netanyahu, we'll wait till the war's over and then we'll figure out. Like it's not the time. No, I think after that, Netanyahu should resign in disgrace. Then, in terms of the actual response, as Israel always did before Netanyahu, they always dealt with the terrorism problem with assassination campaigns, with special operations. Gaza is the most monitored place on the planet. They can pick these guys off, and even more important than that is immediately. Let me finish my answer. Yeah, those are the guys they're still negotiating with to try to get the hostages out. The other thing is the number one priority should have been the hostages, and it is self-evident that when you're fighting a war this way, your number one priority is not to get your people out. Look, Israel has all the chips. They got a ton of hostages, prisoners of their own that they could exchange for the hostages sit there, which is how they've gotten the hostages they've gotten so far out. And then after all of that, after the hostage swaps, after assassination campaigns and special ops, you come to the table with a real two-state agreement again. You rise above it. Instead of turning the world against you, you win the world over by saying, listen, we took a big loss. We're going to kill or get the people who did this to us, but we are not just going to make life hell for the people of Gaza anymore. We're going to offer them their freedom. And I think there was a real opportunity to do that.
You want to answer the question, what should have Israel done on October 8th?
So I said this right from the get-go.
Yeah, that's a good point. And he's right about the fact that Gaza is the most monitored place in the world. And Israel likes to brag about how they have some of the most advanced technology in the world. So you're telling me they couldn't have done an advanced special ops? You're telling me that they just have to carpet bomb Gaza to find the hostages and get Hamas when they're the most advanced military, one of the most advanced militaries in the world. And they already have all this intelligence and facial recognition technology and all this other shit on the most monitored place in the world in Gaza. Yeah, that makes no sense. The reason why they're doing this is because they want to wipe them out. October 7th was a great excuse for them to go in and to try to wipe the Palestinians out permanently and to get them out of Gaza permanently so they could steal their land. Because that guy's right. If they had been like, we really want to get the hostages, they could have negotiated. That's the only time they got them out. But they chose not to. They've never thought the hostages were a priority.
After it happened, so first of all, going with special forces, people say it's hard. Yeah, war's hard. And so when they started dropping bombs on the buildings, I was like, wait, what if the hostages are in the buildings? And I thought you said Hamas is in the tunnels. So how does it help to bomb a building? It's not like and then Israel brought in CNN.
Exactly. They say Hamas is in the tunnels. So why are you bombing the buildings? And you said that the hostages were so important. So then why are you bombing the buildings with the hostages in it? Like, see how this doesn't add up?
Showed them the tunnels at one point in the conflict about 3 months ago, and they were totally unaffected by the bombing. So the idea that they didn't target civilians is just counter to every fact in front of us. So instead, I would have wanted them to target Hamas to try to rescue the hostages. And then the most important part is this is the time for a peace deal. So in the middle of nothing happening, Netanyahu isn't going to, or anyone else isn't going to rise up and be like, oh yeah, you know what, let's do a peace deal now. No, peace deals happen after conflict and after war. And so here we have already had 6 months of some of the worst conflict and war we have seen. This is when you make a peace deal. And how do you do it? Let's be specific about it, because it's not just generic. You do a deal with the Palestinian Authority, and then once they have the credibility of delivering a Palestinian state, they then come back into Gaza and drive Hamas out. So if you say that's going to be difficult, of course it's going to be difficult. Every part of this is difficult, right? But at least then they would have the credibility. We delivered the Palestinian state. And then that way they can drive out Hamas. And that goes back to this earlier point. Look, the people of Gaza are devastated by what's happened. They're not exactly, thrilled about what Hamas did in a lot of ways. If the Palestinian Authority delivers and Hamas didn't, then they have the credibility to actually manage that state. And you've got to look, if you're looking at it strictly from an Israeli point of view, you've got to get rid of the occupation. It is an albatross around your neck. It makes the world hate you. It makes you look like an international pariah, and it creates nonstop conflict, because no human beings on earth, no race, no ethnicity is ever going to say, okay, I accept being occupied and I will now bow my head to you. No, they will always fight you. And look at what Netanyahu just said. He said, I'm never going to give them a state. That means permanent war. That is definitely not the answer. The answer is make that peace deal today.
Batya, go ahead.
I mean, neither of you has mentioned actually Netanyahu's biggest crimes since October 7th, which I think from my point of view are, number one, there was a plan on the table to identify Fatah members living in Gaza and to have them train in Jordan to become a police force in Gaza with the cooperation of Israel. And he nixed that. And that was a plan that was handed to him on a silver platter that would have given them the credibility that they need. He also allowed Smotrich to nix a plan to allow flour into Gaza through Ashkelon. Again, another thing that would have made it easier for Joe Biden not to do this sort of epic flip-flop. So I'm not saying that there are not mistakes that have been made. I think those two mistakes are incomprehensible to me. But everything else you guys described is exactly what Israel was doing. The reason they have dropped these 2,000-ton bombs was to get at the tunnels. You keep saying, oh, they didn't get to, that's why they were using so many more munitions. And yet, I keep coming back to this, but the combatant to civilian ratio was not higher than it was in Fallujah, despite the fact that they were using such heavier artillery, because they were doing that in order to access these shelters. I agree with you both that they made a decision that getting rid of Hamas was more important than the hostages. I think that, again, when Netanyahu meets his maker, as you say, he will have to,
Why didn't they go into the tunnels then? They really wanted to get at Hamas. Why didn't they go into the tunnels? Because they're cowards. They didn't want to actually fight the militants. They just wanted to drop bombs. And if it killed women and children, well, that's the cost of war, because they're cowards and it's easier for them to press buttons.
Answer for that. I don't know what the right answer to that question was, but I guess I would ask you guys, does the will of the Israeli people in terms of it being a sovereign nation play no role here? I mean, aside from that, I think that the plans you guys described is pretty close to what the Israelis were actually doing. Does the will of the people in terms of, the polling suggesting that, Israel is less divided about, the need for military action?
Well, they can have their will, but then I don't want to pay for it. Okay? This is the will of the Israeli people, because this always happens. They want all of our money, but then we complain about the way that the government is behaving. They go, we're a sovereign nation, okay? Stop telling us what to do. Okay, then I want my taxes back.
Right away. I mean, Dave, is it tolerable to you to live in a world where that man sitting on Shani Luke's broken, stripped body is allowed to live? I feel that it's intolerable to me to live in a world where that man is allowed to live.
That's a really good question.
I want to hear this
question. I would just say that, look, certainly, I get the feeling that you have. Isn't it intolerable that there wouldn't be revenge taken against this person?
It's not revenge, it's justice.
Sure, justice, whatever you want to call it. It's basically synonyms. But yes, that you would get the guy who did that is the point. All I'm saying, if that was a family member of mine, I'd certainly feel the same way. I would also point out, you have to also put yourself in the position of the Palestinians, that there's been lots of those people for them too. My point is that as a government, as a policy, no, the priority should be getting the hostages back, not getting justice or revenge or whatever you want to call it. I'm not saying that shouldn't be a close second priority, but the number one priority is that there are still innocent hostages who are alive.
Right,
we should get them back.
So that's my second question.
Yes, if you want justice.
Does what the Israelis wanted first matter to you? Like in terms of sovereignty, in terms of that question.
If you want to talk about national sovereignty, look,
you're asking me, do you think it matters what the Israelis wanted?
Yes, listen, I'm responding. If you're talking about national sovereignty, I was asked a question about how I think Israel should respond, and I gave you the answer. In terms of the argument of what the Israeli people want for their government to do, if you're going to make that nationalistic argument, fine, keep my tax dollars out of it. Okay, let America not be a part of it. We do not have to pick fights in a battle thousands of miles away. It was the advice of all of the founders; they were unanimous on this. That this would be the death of our country if we embarked on these entangling alliances. Okay. That's my position. America shouldn't be involved.
We're almost out of time, so go ahead, Dennis.
Okay, so I asked, what would you like Israel to do? And finally, when an answer was given, they should pick off Palestinian leaders and make an offer for a state. So you commit these horrors, kill more Jews than were killed in a day since the Holocaust, and we're offering you a state. I would think that the lesson that Palestinians would learn is, hey, October 7th really worked. Look, the Israelis are sort of giving up, and they're not even striking us. What a great deal. It would be like the United States after Pearl Harbor going, look, Japan, we understand you have interest in the Far East, and we would like to accommodate you now.
No, it's not like that, because again, Imperial Japan was not occupying us. Or maybe I'm just getting too tired, and so I'm starting to like lose my train of thought. Maybe that analogy was supposed to work the other way. America occupying Imperial Japan. I don't know. I'm starting to get tired. Maybe it's this fool, but like they're always going to have that excuse. Oh, October 7th really worked. It's like, and he's acting like there's been no consequence. They've been terrorizing the Palestinians for 7 months.
Would have been the analogy that I would think. So it would be a reward of atrocities. It would be counterproductive from an Israeli standpoint. And I keep going back to this. Even Israelis who want 2 states have given up for the time being, and I keep answering for the time being. Should Palestinians change? 70% of Palestinians support what happened on October 7th. But I got to say, the most depressing thing was what you said, like you say, atrocities on both sides. Your moral equivalence troubles me. That's the most disturbing thing I've heard in the 2 hours we've had together. That when she mentioned this woman who was murdered and her half-naked body paraded, and you said, well, I have lots of those people too, lots of Palestinians. Really? Can you name one instance of a Palestinian woman paraded naked by Israelis?
No, that's not what I was saying.
What were you saying?
I was just saying, I mean,
you were responding to the specific example of that Israeli.
I'm saying the feeling that a family member would have of their family member being killed and wanting to get justice against that person. There's been lots of that on the other side as well. That's my point. The same way that somebody would join up with Hamas because their little brother got killed in some Israeli strike. That's the point that I'm making.
So, by the way, one other point.
He's so offended by the moral equivalence again, which reveals it's because he thinks that Israelis matter more than Palestinians. Because the point that Dave Smith was making was correct. The Palestinians have had many of their family members murdered and had those moments of rage. A lot of the reason why Hamas militants join Hamas is because one of their family members were killed by Israel. And they don't have that rage. But to Dennis Prager, that rage is not justified because they're not as human.
The Israeli opposition, you guys, even my dear Batya, she is a dear soul, is not on the Netanyahu bandwagon. By the way, I'm not on the Netanyahu bandwagon, and I'm not on the anti-Netanyahu bandwagon. I don't give a hoot who the Prime Minister of Israel is, for a very good reason. The opposition in Israel, the left-wing opposition, has announced they hate Netanyahu and have announced we would do the exact same thing he is doing. That is relevant.
Okay, all right, Jank, go ahead, respond, and try to keep it 2 minutes for the last statement from everybody.
So that last thing that Dennis said is deeply problematic for a reason I'll come back to. So first of all, on the sovereignty issue that Batya made, you got sovereignty to do anything you like, just not with our money. So, and the $4 billion we're sending every year immediately, as long as they keep doing the occupation, $14 billion is unconscionable. Shouldn't send $1 of taxpayer money. Don't tell me you want sovereignty and then come and ask us, demand us of our money and our weapons, etc. No way. Number 2, you said that Israel's been trying.
Yes, exactly. You don't get to talk about sovereignty and then come in, as he just said correctly, not just ask, demand our tax dollars.
And give them a state. That's not remotely true for the last 25 years, quarter of a century. They've not made any effort. In fact, they've gone exactly the opposite. Netanyahu was saying, I will never give them a state. They have propped up Hamas to make sure the Palestinians can never have a state. So they have been the obstacle to peace. If you say Hamas is an obstacle to peace, Netanyahu is 10 times the obstacle to peace. When you talk about kill ratios, you say, oh, isn't Hamas terrible because of what they did to these civilians? I always agree, right? Our side constantly says, yes, that is terrible. But when we say, okay, now when Israel did it 30 times worse, isn't that an atrocity? You go, how dare you? Of course it's not an atrocity because by definition, Israel. That's not an argument. It is they've now killed 25,000. Imagine a basketball arena full of women and children, and Israel has killed them them all. And are you saying that the IDF is the most incompetent military in the world? Golly gee, we accidentally murdered 25,000 women and children by dropping 2,000 bombs on their schools, hospitals, and buildings? That's not an accident. We accidentally killed all the humanitarian, not all, but a lot of the humanitarian workers, the journalists, etc. Oh, by the way, the accidents including sniper bullets to the neck. These are not accidents. In your world, Israel can do no wrong. So if they do it, it must be because they were defending themselves, and the dastardly Palestinians deserve everything they had coming, including the imprisonment for 75 or 57 years. Pick your answer. And look, you say that you can't have the idea of a Hamas leader being alive. That bothers you. You should be killed. Well, Netanyahu has now killed 30 times as many people. So do the Palestinians then get to use your logic and say, I can't stand to have Netanyahu alive. I want him dead.
All right, so we're going to have it. We've only got a couple minutes left, literally 2 minutes. So try everybody to keep a 1 minute response. I would phrase it this way instead of trying to respond to a simple question. Let's just take the last thing you'd like the audience to be able to take away with. So Batya, we'll go ahead and we'll start with you.
I wanted to open with this, but I'm going to close with it instead. I'm going to mention all of the areas of common ground that we have here because there was so much of it. The first is I think we all agree that Hamas are terrorists who terrorize Israelis and Palestinians, and the world would be better off without them. I think we all agreed that Israel had a moral obligation to respond in some way militarily to what happened on October 7th. I think we all agreed that there are many innocent Palestinians in Gaza, and every death is tragic of those innocents. I think we all agree that if we could immediately remove innocent civilians from the line of fire, we would. I think we all, or at least 3 of us, agree that Netanyahu has made major mistakes in the past and in the present. And I think that we all agree that ultimately we would like to see every person living from the river to the sea, living in dignity with full civil rights. And so I'm so grateful to have had this experience and found all this common ground with you all.
Well said. All right, thank you, Batya. Dave, why don't you go ahead?
Sure. Okay, so it was about 200 years ago that Thomas Jefferson had this great quote. I do believe it was in 1824, where he was speaking about slavery. And he said, I might butcher this a little bit, but he said, we've got the wolf by the ear, and we can neither afford to hang on to it nor let it go. And I think this was a common objection to abolitionists that people at the time had. They were like, look, we've enslaved these people for so long. If we let them go now, they're going to kill all of us. And you could kind of see where that was reasonable at the time, to be concerned about that. But with 200 years of hindsight, we can all look at this and go, yeah, but you can't enslave people. And whatever problem comes after that, you just have to abolish this. And that's kind of the same way I feel about the occupation of the West Bank and Gaza. It's been since 1967, man. You just can't do this to people anymore. Mr. Prager used the example of World War II over and over and over again today. And I know I'm not a left-winger, Jank is, and the rest of us aren't. But I know when I say, hey, we should make a peace deal after October 7th, a lot of people go, that sounds wimpy and left-wingy. How about forget the lessons of World War II? How about the lessons of Vietnam and Korea and Iraq and Afghanistan and Syria and Libya and Somalia and Yemen and a million others? Actually, we should be striving for peace. This isn't anything like World War II. This is a group of people who have been totally dominated by Israel since at least 1967. Israel isn't going anywhere. From the river to the sea is never going to happen. But these people can be given their freedom and peace can be achieved.
Okay, well said, Dave. Go ahead, Dennis.
So I would love that too. Right now, most Palestinians would like to get rid of a Jewish state. I wish that weren't true. If it weren't true, I do believe there would be peace. I think that is the honest approach. I just have to say, even though it's my final statement, I nevertheless have to respond. The comparisons you make are remarkable. I mean, that the slavery of blacks and the status of Palestinians are comparable. It's such an insult to blacks. All you suffered was what Palestinians suffered. No, it's not a logical. Well, no, it's not logical because it's not analogous. That's the point. You can't have a logical analogy if it's not analogous. Okay, so
Dennis Prager is more offended by analogies that don't paint the Israelis as looking like angels. Like any analogy. Like you'll notice throughout this whole debate, he's so mad. False equivalent. He keeps accusing Dave Smith of false equivalencies. False equivalencies. False equivalencies. And he's so mad they just brought up that Thomas Jefferson quote. He's infuriated because he hates and he's mad at the idea that he would, in his mind, have all these false equivalencies because the Israelis in his mind can do no wrong. They can do no wrong. And nothing they've done is wrong. Which is exactly how a lot of white slaveholders felt. So,
one final word: the pariah state of Israel. That is correct. That was what, in fact, Chuck Schumer said. Israel twice in his talk that Israel is a pariah state. There's a reason that Israel is a pariah state. It's because the left-wing media in the world have decided to declare, along with Muslim countries, Israel a pariah state. So here's just a couple of statistics that are worthy of noting. In the last few years, 500,000 people have been killed in a breakaway province in Ethiopia called Tigray. Now, one of you watching this probably knows about it. I don't know if anybody on this panel knows about it. 500,000 slaughtered and about 80,000 rapes. Is Ethiopia a pariah state? Of course not, because they're not Jews. So nobody gives a damn. How about this? 60,000 Christians have been slaughtered in West Africa since 2000. They've been slaughtered by Muslim groups. Does anybody call the Muslim groups pariahs or any Muslim country a pariah? Of course not, because nobody gives a damn about the black Christians of West Africa because they're not being killed by Jews. That's the reason Israel is a pariah state. Nobody would like to acknowledge it. It's painful, but the truth is often painful.
Okay, all right.
Wow.
Go ahead.
So after 57 years of
and it's actually a common tactic of Zionists to do this, that whenever they're called out for their genocide, they do the what about it, insert other war or atrocity. They do it all the time. What about Afghanistan? What about Ukraine? What about Congo? What about, and it just on and on and on and on. What about Haiti? And they're not actually saying what about any of those because they care at all about any of those war zones, those conflicts, those genocides. They do it to constantly make excuses for themselves and to get the attention off what they're doing to the Palestinians. They don't want to talk about the Palestinians. They don't want to talk about the genocide in Palestine. So they try to divert your attention to go, why are you trying to hold us accountable? Why are you trying to hold us accountable? You know, what about Yemen? You hear that one a lot. Why didn't you say anything about Yemen? What about Yemen? What about Syria? But again, we're giving a ton of money to you guys to carry out this genocide against the Palestinians. You've connected yourselves with our government at the hip in ways that no other government has. So you get special privileges. That's why we're calling you out. That's why. It's not because it's not because it's the Jews. It's not because, oh, it's only when it's the Jews. No, it's because you're a very powerful country that is occupying another people, and you are doing it with the full support and taxpayer money and military weaponry of the United States. That's why. But in his mind, no, it's just because they're a Jewish state. It's just because they're Jews. And then he keeps like accusing Arab states around them of also hating Jews and being anti-Semitic when like no, just saying that they called them a pariah state when they didn't.
Occupation, Israel's the victims, and they're special victims. Okay, so look, I care about both Israeli civilians and Palestinian civilians. And so if you say, oh, well, you know, brilliant point about slavery, I said it about the North and the South before, hey, the black slaves would get rid of a white state. We can't have it. We can't have it. If we free them, they could kill us all. They are so against the white state. They're so against America. We can never let them go. By the way, that is what is said in every occupation, in every empire, in every war. And after every war, they say, oh, look at how many of our people they killed. They killed our women, our children, etc. We can't make peace with them. And what does that lead to? It leads to more war, more killings, both on the Israeli side and the Palestinian side. Peace gets to peace, war gets a war. At some point, and this is the point, we have to say, stop going towards war. What are we bombing Iran for? Are we nuts? We want a giant war in the Middle East that drags us into it, robs us of trillions of dollars, let alone our kids who can get killed there, let alone the potentially millions of people who can kill. The moral cancer here that is causing every problem we're talking about is the occupation. You have to let them go. If you're Israel, you have to let them go. If you don't let them go, this conflict and this war will never end. And then you can call it any name you like. You can say, oh, they're terrorists and we're the good guys. But it doesn't matter because more Israelis are going to die and more Palestinians are going to die. Let's do peace right now.
Okay. Zero Hedge would like me to extend a thank you to tonight's sponsor, Public Square, for supporting free speech and open debate. If you want to learn about them, you should re-listen to Dave's ad. I want to extend a thank you to all of you. You guys were, for the most part, very cooperative and you were great and respectful to each other. And I think people will really get a lot out of it. And I want to thank you, Zero Hedge, for inviting me to do this. So thank you, everybody, for watching. And we will see you all later. You can find any of these great people. I believe we'll have links, at least on my channel, I'll have links in the description where people can go and find them. And I highly recommend checking them all out. So thank you very much. It's been a pleasure. And
that was good. That was very good. Like I said, I didn't agree with every single thing that Jank and Dave said, but for the most part, I think that they did a really good job. Man, Dennis Prager, next level Delulu. So fucking delusional. How do you can't reason with someone like that. You cannot reason with someone like that. This is so dark. Anyway, guys, if you made it to the end with me, thanks for watching it with me, sticking around. Let me know in the comments what you guys thought of the debate, who you agreed with, who you didn't agree with. I would love to hear from Arabs in the diaspora. See, I'm so tired. In the diaspora. Arabs who are living in any of Egypt, Lebanon, Palestine, the occupied West Bank, like any of those places, what you guys thought about this. I'd be really interested to hear your perspective. Israelis, you know, I'm kind of, do I want to hear from you though? Maybe. I definitely don't want to hear from Zionists. You don't want to hear from Zionists. All right. Anyway, I'm going to go to bed. It's like 4 a.m. here. Isn't it? Okay. I love you all. Until the next video, free Palestine.